Yeah, Leo, you gotta be up there too.
Oh, yeah, Leo, yeah.
Come on, Leo.
Because we do have a quorum, so I do need to open a meeting.
They smile.
So welcome, everyone. This does constitute a meeting of the Dale Street School Building Committee. So just get through a little bit of legalese, and then we'll get started. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Dale Street School Building Committee is being conducted by a remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. Obviously, things have changed a little bit. We do have in-person attendance. Sorry, Dan, thank you. And that also was extended through April of next year, just for record. Okay, so with that out of the way, Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Mars. I'm the superintendent of schools and also a member of the school building committee. Just want to really thank you for showing up tonight. I think this is a topic that everyone's been waiting for. What is the project cost and the impact on your taxes? So I think it's a pretty straightforward agenda. And again, we're just really excited to offer this opportunity to build a state-of-the-art building for our kids. And that's what this is all about. So I appreciate you coming by. Turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, everyone. So I also have with me members of the school building committee, some of which fill other roles. Obviously, Dr. Marsden and Steve Brenham from the schools, Selectman Marcucci, and then current building committee members, Tom Erb, Mike Weber, and myself, and Leo Brown from the school committee. So thank you all for coming. I will jump in because I know everybody's anxious about this topic. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about tonight really is focused on costs, and we will get through the presentation as judiciously as we can so that you can ask questions, as I'm sure there will be lots of them. This is an incredibly complex project, and there are a lot of things that people, even like myself, who spend their career doing things like this, still have through some of these processes. So we will go ahead and go through that. So it's probably too difficult to see here, but we can go through if people have questions, all the individual line items. But basically, this is what's called the total project budget template that the MSBA uses. It was formerly known as the Form 3011 previously. Basically, and it outlines how we put together our budget. It includes feasibility study phase money, which we're at the end of now, and then all of the costs that it would take to get through the end of the project. So that includes all design fees, construction costs, site development fees, etc. Sorry about that. And then you see a bunch of equations off to the right, which we'll get into a little bit later, that have to do with how the MSBA limits what each town can receive in terms of a grant. They do cap certain things to ensure that they are distributing funds to municipalities across the state equitably. The district has a reimbursement rate of 43.42. That is our base rate of 39.84 plus some incentives that we are pursuing, having to do with sustainability goals. And sorry, my eyes here. There's 2 points for sustainability goals, and then we got another 1.5 points for how we maintain our buildings. They basically look at how we maintain our buildings, and they give us a score from 0 to 2, and we're at 1.58. That works out when all is said and done. When we get through everything, we have an effective rate of somewhere between 22 and 23% in terms of how much the state will reimburse us for the cost of the project. These are some of the caps that we've talked about. Consultant services, the owner's project manager, Left Field, who is with us tonight, and the designer, Arrow Street, and all of their sub-consultants have caps on their fees by the MSBA that have just recently changed, but they're up to 3.5% of construction up to the designer of 10% and up to $500 per square foot of construction costs. So cost beyond $500 a square foot, the fees for the OPM and designer are non-reimbursable. Next up is owner's contingency. It used to be at the past average cap was 2%. The new cap for owner's contingency is 0.5%. So any owner's contingency above that 0.5% is solely borne by the town. Demolition and abatement also has been, will be capped. They haven't identified how that will be capped, but currently that is not something that will affect this project. Construction cost cap was just recently raised from $333 a square foot to $360 a square foot. It should be noted that the MSBA does not expect people to build buildings for $360 a square foot. What they're really saying there is that that's the amount that allows them to participate with as many municipalities as possible and distributing those funds across the entire Commonwealth. So jumping in a little bit into the project budget review, the first section up at the top up here. Okay. These are the fees that we are spending currently for our OPM and our design team, and some other miscellaneous design costs related to getting us to a project that is ready to vote. We appropriated that money at previous town meeting in 2018, right? 2018 for $1 million, and we have been using that to get us to this stage tonight. Below that, then the next stages are administrative fees, legal fees, the OPM's fees, and these are still in negotiation, but these are basically not to exceed numbers right now. So we have about 2.5 million for the OPM, 250,000. This is sort of miscellaneous testing and permitting fees, potentially advertising. Again, can you? Oh, is it? Sorry, just technical difficulties here. Slow that down. Also in there, owner's insurance, administrative costs, etc., are in that phase there. And then you can see off to the side the calculation. So soft costs are below the reimbursable cap of 20% by 3.6 million, but there are some areas where the caps for the designer and the OPM team limit what the reimbursable is there. So currently the administration subtotal is 2.721 million with eligible excluded items of 1.06 million and total estimated basis for the grant of 1.661 million with an estimated facilities grant for this section of 720,000. The next phase, the next stage is design fees. So you'll have, this is the architectural and engineering, and it's broken down by the different phases of design that occur after the town votes on the project. The first stage would be design development, proceeding into construction contract documents, into bidding, and then construction administration and closeout. And then also below that is some reimbursable services, again, for construction testing, printing, hazardous materials if needed, geotech and geoenvironmental, site surveying, any wetland studies, traffic studies, etc., are in that category. So the total architectural and engineering fees currently are 6.647 million, with 1.7 million of that excluded and about 4.9 million included in the MSBA's estimated reimbursement, which is about 2.1 million. Next up is the construction phase. And so here is where we would pay a builder to build the project, along with getting all of the trades and their subcontractors on board. jump this ahead. This gets a little bit more detailed in where it breaks down each of the trades. The trades are broken down by system. So that's substructure, which is foundations, basically, shell, or the exterior walls, windows, roof, etc. Interior construction, all the interior walls, finishes, staircases, services, that includes conveying systems or elevators, plumbing, HVAC, fire protection, and electrical. And then equipment and furnishings that are part of the hard construction. And then special construction if needed. We don't have any special construction for this. Then building site work. So that includes all the site prep, improvements, site civil and mechanical utilities. So things like sewer and power and all the utilities that are brought to site or on site and modified accordingly. And then that comes out to a construction trade subtotal. And then below that, we carry contingencies for things that may occur during construction, bonds to ensure performance by the subcontractors, insurance, overhead and profit, and what's called general conditions and general requirements, which have to do with the contractor's costs to perform the work, and then their fee and their contingency. So this has our construction budget currently at $64,525,000. And I'm using round numbers, it gets more detailed, but that's basically where we're at. And then that 31,338,000 is excluded. And so 33 million is what is the basis for the reimbursement, which is estimated at 14,400,000. And so again, you can see off to the side, there's a whole series of formulas that identify where the caps are. For instance, site cost for site construction is capped at 8%. And again, every project these days exceeds those caps, and same with the construction cost per square foot, which is now $360 a square foot. You know, as noted, all projects exceed that number. Okay, then down below the contractors' numbers are some miscellaneous project fees. This would be for fees from a utility company, for tie-ins, testing services, swing space or modulars if needed, other project costs like mailing and moving expenses, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And technology. The furniture, fixtures, and equipment and technology budgets here are basically, someone once said, if you pick the building up and shook it, that would be the loose stuff that falls out. That's all the things that's not part of the hard construction, but that are required for the school. And then below that, there's a couple of sections here that outline our contingency, the owner's contingency, to deal with any potential risk on the project or unknowns on the project. And there are two contingencies there for the owner. One is a construction contingency that's intended to pay for any construction change orders. And then the owner's contingency, which is there to pay for owner's soft cost change orders, which would be for things like if some redesign fees were needed by the design team, that type of thing, or additional testing. But things that are not part of the construction budget. So the reason why we give a range of what the reimbursement may be, it'll be dependent upon whether we need to spend that money or not. If we spend all of it, we get the maximum reimbursement on it, but we're also spending more money, so it's a double-edged sword there. All of this results in a total project budget of $81,893,663. with an estimated town share of about $63 million. And we have already appropriated $1 million, so that the vote request that will happen in November will be for $80,893,633. So a lot of people have been asking about where we stand comparative to other districts. So I worked with Left Field to pull together this slide here. These are all projects that are very similar. They're all elementary schools. They have obviously very different enrollments. They also have different timing. So you have to factor that into account as well. For instance, buildings that are being bid out in 2020 are not going to cost the same as a building being bid out in 2021 or 2022 or 2023 due to inflation and escalation. But these are still all relevant comparisons. They are all projects that are net zero energy buildings or net zero ready buildings. And they have, again, varying timeframes, but it gives you a sense of where we stand from a cost per square foot of construction and as well as a cost per student. That's also a good way to compare across multiple towns that have different projects. And what you can see is on a cost per square foot, on a cost per student rate basis, Medfield is actually on the low side with Ashland, which is actually a project I'm managing currently in my office, and Acton Boxborough coming beneath that. But again, those are 2020 projects and starting bidding. Acton Boxborough was 2020. Ashland will start construction in November of this year. And then Medfield is slated, if approved, to start construction next year. So factoring in that inflation allows you to adjust accordingly. And then you can see just the differences in size. Westwood is also another very similar project. This is a project that my office is managing as well. But it's 560 students, so 15 less than we are. It's about almost 20,000 square feet larger. It is about $5.8 million more expensive. So you can see their cost per student is about $13,000 per student more, or roughly 10% higher than Medfield. This just gives you an idea of projects that are around us right now or within the last 5 years. You can see that school construction has been booming in this area, as you can see. Many of our neighbors have projects either completed or in the works. So this is a little bit of a clearer summary. I apologize. It's a lot of information and a lot of different line items, but this goes through, again, the $1 million that we've already appropriated and spent for feasibility study and schematic design. And then future phases, owner's project management fee, owner services. And I'm not going to go into each of these individually, but if someone has questions about these and what is in each bucket, please let me know when we get to Q&A, because I'm happy to go back and go through these lines in detail. Also, then getting into the construction management side, pre-construction services, the construction costs, which are broken, we can break down each trade if you'd like, the miscellaneous costs for utilities, testing, et cetera, FF&E and technology, and contingencies. And you're going to hear a lot of alphabet soup. So please, if I say something that confuses you, it's my nature. It's the business I live in. So you're going to hear a lot of different things. And if I abbreviate something and you're not sure what it is, please, by all means, ask me for clarification. So once again, total project budget. This basically looks at the maximum and sort of minimums when we look at the contingency consumption. I can tell you that we will use some contingency. There's no such thing as a project that does not use some contingency. That's why it's there, to make sure that we have the funds available to deal with things that are unknown, because it's simply impossible to know everything about a project before starting construction. So what does that mean for all the residents of this town? We have 2 borrowing scenarios on the table currently, and the selectmen are still evaluating which one to proceed with. So we're going to present both of them, and then if you have questions, please ask during Q&A. But we have been in consultation with our bond advisor, and thankfully, our credit or our bond rating has remained the same. It was not downgraded, which is good. So our first scenario would be a 30-year bond with a level principal payment, and our bond advisor is suggesting that would be a 2.25% interest rate with the average assessed value in Medfield for a home is $692,000. This would mean that if we pursue this scenario, the cost, if you were looking at your own house, would be $1.23 per $1,000 of assessed value. So for the average assessed value at 692, that would mean in year one, it would be an $852 increase. And in a level principal payment scenario, that decreases each year over the course of the bond. And that would result by year 30 of only $520 for that year being paid towards this bond. So the average over the course of that 30 years is $686 for the average assessed value. It should be noted also, we've talked about this in the past at some of our meetings, that there is some debt rolling off the books in the next 2 years that will help to mitigate that. So there's about $117 that we are all for an average assessed value home that's currently being paid towards existing debt for the 3 school project way back in the early 2000s, and that will be rolling off and completed. So that $117 will help to not minimize, but help reduce some of the impact of this major project. Scenario 2 is a 20-year bond. This is basically looking at it and saying, you know, if you think about a 30-year mortgage and a 15-year mortgage on your house, do you want to pay more over a shorter period of time and pay less interest over the life, or you know, do you want to spread that cost out over a longer period? So this is a shorter period. This would be a $1.49 per thousand valuation. So that would mean a year 1 increase of $1,030, reducing each year to year 20 at $776, with an average of $903 over the course of that 20 years. And once again, debt rolling off the books of $117 within 2 years of this borrowing. Okay, so next steps. The project has been submitted to the MSBA for their board meeting. The schematic design package that will occur on October 27th. And they will vote on the project to approve it to proceed. We do have a community forum planned for October 28th. My guess is we will probably add a few more in there on October, but we do have one already planned for the 28th. The special town meeting has been set for November 7th. Do we have a time yet, Mike?
Not yet.
Not yet. We don't have a time yet. We will broadcast that as soon as we have that and all the logistics around that. And then we have, I believe it's tentative still, but the ballot vote, do we have any update on the ballot vote?
I think that's as firm as the special town meeting date.
Okay. Okay, so November 15th for the ballot vote. Special town meeting will require a 2/3 supermajority in order for this project to proceed. And then the ballot vote requires a simple majority on the 15th. Okay, so that's a lot of information and I'm happy to go back. So what I'd like to do, this is also just in case anybody's looking for more information, we'll have that up there. But if I'm sure there are questions out there, before I open up the microphone for questions, I'd like to see if anyone from the building committee or from the schools or school committee would like to say any words before we bring up to the public. Good. Okay. Okay, so questions.
What the procedures there?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Sorry, you're a bit more expert at this than I am. We do have a microphone up here for questions. Because we are broadcasting this, if you would come up and just state your name and address, and then you can speak into the microphone. That would be great. Even though I know you, Mr. Pucci.
Dave Pucci, 38 Charlesdale Road. My question is very basic though. For the special town meeting, you need the supermajority to pass it. So if it doesn't pass, you have a ballot thing afterwards?
I believe you still do have the ballot afterwards. Correct, Mike? Even if it, you know, at that point is kind of a moot point, there still would be a valid ballot vote. Because I believe that has to be advertised like a certain period in advance. I forget the exact number of days, but So once you advertise it, you do have to hold it. So
So
yes,
community forums that are just for questions and answers for people that the town meetings where.
Correct. correct. We're trying to get as much information out as possible beforehand, obviously. We've got about 6 weeks and we certainly have, we're trying to reach as many people as possible. We will be at Medfield Day. We will have a booth there being available to answer questions about the project, et cetera. But we will be doing more forums and as well more SBC meetings in October to prepare for town meeting.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Eileen Murphy, 5-minute comment. I want to follow up on the question that was just asked.
Mhm.
The 2/3 vote at town meeting, what clout does that have if you're going to then still hold the ballot and you only have to win by 1 vote? How
You can't, so the supermajority at town meeting is to vote on the appropriation. And then the ballot is just to authorize the borrowing. So you can't basically, even if you get the majority at the ballot after a failed town meeting, you can't appropriate funds because it hasn't been approved by town meeting. So there's you don't need one or the other, you need both.
Right, and so is there an added cost on the town? Because then typically you're having people sit up at the senior center that vote. So we're having a vote that potentially has no clout. So we're spending money when we don't have to.
I mean, my understanding is you do have to have the ballot vote.
Yeah, conceivably, you don't have, there's no magic to the order.
Yeah.
So I mean, if it passed the ballot box and failed by 1 vote at town meeting, you can call it another town meeting.
Right.
Okay, so now I'm gonna ask the question, to make the statement and ask some questions, but I wanted to just clarify what the gentleman asked. So it's very, very, very unfortunate that we're finally having this meeting now, because I know a year ago, this type of conversation would have been great before we got all the way down the path where it appears that the decision's been made and people, it's yes or no. And so I'm absolutely positively from the school of, I don't support the new campus at all. I am concerned as a taxpaying citizen of Medfield that we still don't know, and I'll look to the selectmen who are here, what we're doing with State Hospital, which has an overriding bearing on our taxes. If we were to do something at Wheelock, we don't know what we're going to do at Dale Street. So there's another level of unknown. And you look at, and just what's going on post-COVID with technology, I'm in the CE space. If you just watch the news this morning, there's over 110 votes off the coast of LA because you just can't get enough in here. There's not enough technology being made. So to my mind, there's no rush to this. Even the lumber costs finally starting to come down. But when you look at trying to start a year from now and putting a ton of money of hard taxpayer dollars, I just question why, especially when there's a lot that we don't know. And then we look at the infrastructure of, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying anything, the infrastructure that if we do nothing, we build a deal, and we give our teachers a new building, not a new light bulb and calling it a reno, that we literally put a new building there so these hardworking teachers get a new school, which to me is the most important thing, a new school, not the location. We know the location at Dale works. We know that the infrastructure for safety with traffic, it all works. We don't have to put new stop signs up. We don't have to reroute traffic. We don't have to create a lot of chaos in a section of town that doesn't need it. But putting a new school in is absolutely positively imperative. So it's, can we delay the MSBA vote so that a lot, and I certainly know I'm not the only one. If you look at some of the polls that people are doing off the cuff, there's a very large momentum of people that are saying, fine, hold the meeting in November. If you get it 2/3 that doesn't pass, then we have to go back and explain why. Why are we pushing the envelope that hard when we're finally having face-to-face meetings, which we know we would have loved a year ago, and COVID didn't allow it. And I just left the Park and Rec meeting, trying to ask questions on chat, which is the most frustrating thing in the world. I was head of Park and Rec back in 2007. I knew what we were trying to put forth up at McCarthy. I was trying to share those data points, and it pretty much got shot down. And I'm like, wait a minute, we had a building for 4.75 million. Maybe today it's 8 million, big deal, but it's better than 21 million. So I mean, I just want to put that out there. As I've said these statements, I certainly welcome any response from anyone at the table. And Mike, you and I have had some email correspondence over the summer. I've said it before, back in my early sales days, don't confuse efforts with results. I 100% respect the effort that everyone has put forth. There's a lot of volunteers going on in this town, but let's not confuse efforts with results. I mean, the result should be a new school, absolutely positively. That's what we should be getting. What we're kind of bickering over now, the location, and that's very unfortunate because I don't think we've had a healthy discussion on the location. So a lot of predetermined discussions, one quick meeting, and then that we got to the point where now all we do is talk about Wheelock, when we really should have a healthy discussion about why not do it. Thank you.
So, if I just offer a few thoughts, I didn't know there was a lot there to cover, but what I can tell you is that there is absolutely no evidence that either site location or either project would pass easily. If that were the case, absolutely, we would have to consider that, but that just wasn't the case. You know, we have, there's no data point that says we would get 2/3 supermajority on either project. And so what we have done is we put forth what we believe to be the best project for the town, and that was our charge. And so the only way to find out if the town will accept that is to vote on it. So that's why we are where we are. And I understand you disagree with that and you disagree with our selection. Either way, we were going to have people who disagree with us, right? So we have to make the best decision that we can, and that's what we feel we've done. And we feel like it's time for the town to decide whether to accept it or not. It is absolutely up to the town whether they accept it or not. And so we will see how it plays out. And but I don't believe that it wasn't one meeting. We had site selection was on our agenda for, I believe, at least 15 meetings. I don't remember the exact number. So site selection was not something that was just one meeting. That I would disagree with. Anyone else have any response from Ms. Murphy? Ms. Murphy?
Just, how about the timing? Do you want to talk to that?
The timing of,
Why we're voting now? I mean, to kick the can down the road is gonna, you want to have this vote next year. Number one, I'm not familiar with the MSBA as much as Mike is and some others. But the reality is you have an $80 million product in front of the town right now. It's gonna be more next year. So
significant.
your example of all the boats hanging out, you know, with things on them waiting to get delivered, I don't disagree, that's a real scenario. But in 12 months from now, I can tell you right now, I'm in the construction world, it's at least 5% more.
But the only thing I would say is, at the other location, you're not doing a ton of infrastructure. I mean, I looked
That's
at-
100% lie.
That's incorrect.
It's basically
You're
a
doing
brand new
less.
school.
You're doing less, but it's incorrect that you're not doing infrastructure.
But you're doing infrastructure for things like potential new bridge at Elm. There's a lot
No.
of things that happen.
There's no bridge.
We're not
There
doing
is-
that today.
Okay, hold on. Let me
Okay.
respond to that. There is absolutely no money for a new bridge at Elm. I don't know where you got that information, but it did not come from us.
Yeah, I know, and I did, if you heard the way I phrased that, it's going in the future, but I know what we're looking to do today at Wheelock.
Who has proposed that?
Excuse me?
Who has proposed putting a new bridge at Elm? Because I've never heard that before.
So when I read on what you posted on the website, getting ready for tonight's meeting, where it talked about the 6 traffic concerns, and it was town decision, town decision, town decision. Well, town decision means taxpayers have to pay, right? If there's something that's going to address a bridge, that's going to address new sidewalks, that's going to address, that's a town decision, which means that's tax dollars, yeah?
Yes, but no one here is proposing that. No one here is proposing replacing the bridge at Elm.
Just what you posted, I'm only coming off of what you literally posted, it was red would take care of it, blue was town decision. And
And the bridge wasn't on that list.
the,
No. So let me explain a little bit, because I know this is important, because there's so much information that people are being, that are trying to absorb. So when we looked at the 2 sites, and I can tell you what the big difference was, there was about a $5 million delta between a new build at Wheelock and a new build at Dale. Of that, about $3 million was for, $3.5 million was for a couple of things. Addressing the 2.1 million was for addressing the pavement at Wheelock. This is a problem that does not go away if this project doesn't happen. The town will need to replace that because that parking lot is crumbling. There was 900,000 that was specific to the water line extension, and then $500,000 for what we were carrying for offsite traffic mitigation. That was those were the major differences between the 2 projects. They had nothing to do with Elm. So I have to.
Yeah, and I actually have questions on that. So, Jerry Potts, 7 First Street. So, I know there's been discussion on this. The site work in the PSR that was submitted, as you pointed out, was 9.8 million for the Elm Street location, right? Which was comprised of the 1.5 million in the infrastructure you mentioned, the 2.1 in Wheelock. My question was, there was an a la carte menu that was on the next page in the public forum last year.
The alternate list, is that what you're referring to?
Correct, which included fields.
Correct.
So one of the big things, just a yes or no question, is this project field neutral?
Technically, no. we are replacing the two
No is
fields.
fine, no is fine.
No, I would like to elaborate it, just so people understand. We are building on a field and a half, Jeff, is it a full field? Is it
Field
two
and a
full
half.
fields or is it
Field and a
a
half.
field and a half? So we're technically half a field to the negative because we are replacing one full-size field, but you're correct, there is half a field that will not be replaced.
And what's the additional cost to that?
The additional cost for the field, I believe, was 1.3 million.
Okay, so I want to stop there.
Yep.
People have questioned why I came up with $11 million. 9.8 plus the field is 11 million,
Yes,
correct?
you
But
can't.
I have more, I have more. In addition to
Can
that,
I respond to that for a second?
First question.
You're saying 9.8 million was for the entire site
correct,
development.
correct.
So you're saying that there's no site development at Dale?
No, I'm going to question that in a second too. So we'll go through the numbers there. In addition to that, at a minimum, if we do nothing with Dale Street, the cost to mothball is 1.4 million, correct?
I believe that's close, yeah.
It is,
1.3,
it's
1.4, if I remember correctly.
So that puts us at 12.4. That's the minimum if we do nothing with Dale. In addition to that, we have some proposal that's between 8 million for park and rec and mothball in the park. Well, I'm just saying this is the range of options that are costs that we will pay as taxpayers. And if we're evaluating, which this presentation is, the impact on taxpayers, to just leave nothing there for Dale and say, you'll deal with it later, that impacts our borrowing as well, does it not?
It does, but can I outline what the options are for Dale?
Sure.
Okay. So we have three options on the table for Dale. Mothballing, as you mentioned, which I believe we can do for less than that, but that aside, I don't believe it should be mothballed. Complete abatement and demo, which is 1.9 million. Our current proposal from the permanent building committee is to put Parks and Rec in that building so that they can have the square footage that they need and do the absolute minimum renovation to allow for that. That pricing, we're still working on. We're having a meeting with the warrant committee tomorrow night on it, but it'll be less than $2 million. So we can either A, demolish the building for about 1.9, or we can move Park and Rec in and use it as an asset. And Park and Rec won't take the whole thing. We're still exploring the possibility of moving in Medfield Youth Outreach, and there are other potential tenants that could occupy that building.
Okay, but for
We
each of-
see that building as an asset, not a liability.
we do
And
too
the
as a
town
school.
needs that kind of flexibility, which is why we're proposing to save the building, not demolish it, and use it for some of the other space needs in town.
So what would the MSBA reimbursement be for those projects?
Nothing.
Okay. What's the
It wouldn't
reimbursement?
be, if we were putting, non-MSBA, non-educational spaces into Dale, that wouldn't be reimbursed either. So the point is that Park and Rec is a need that we have. That doesn't go away no matter where we put the school. We have to do Park and Rec, in my opinion. We have to do something for them. Whether it's let them use the existing Dale Street School for less than $2 million, and I think we'll come in even below that, waiting on the pricing. Or it means if we had chosen Dale and we had done an ad reno of the school, or even as you proposed, demolish it and build a new school in its place, we still need to address Parks and Rec.
How
So
much, we had an estimate for Park and Rec elsewhere. What was that number at?
I believe it was somewhere in the 18 to $20 million range.
18 to 20.
Now, I think that was
It was too much.
excessive on
But
I think
probably
we
$10
could
million.
do more, but yeah, I think we could have done something for less than that. But that doesn't go away.
So how much of how much of Dale Street is left when Park and Rec takes that 2 million?
The entire building. We are not proposing demolishing anything at this point.
So what I'm saying is we either have to mothball that or we have to do additional construction.
No, we're proposing putting Parks and Rec in that building.
Right, but then there's the remaining building, you said they're not taking the whole building.
Right, but
They're taking a
they'll be
portion.
occupying it, so you don't have to mothball the entire thing.
What I'm saying is whatever's left over from Park and Rec, how much would be left over?
Like square footage.
Oh, I don't have the square footage, but the current thinking, because we've been working with the architects from Abacus, who were working on the feasibility study for Parks and Rec. And their proposal would be to take the 1969 edition, which is basically the cafeteria, the library, and the classrooms and the kitchen. because they run a lot of programs that they could use a commercial kitchen, so it works out really, really well for them. So they would take that section. The classroom wing wouldn't be used, but the gym could be used for Parks and Rec programming.
So is the gym part of that 2 million?
It would, because we're not putting any money into the gym. They can use it as is.
So we have a facility that we will have to maintain.
For the gym last year.
Yes, there's a brand new floor in the gym for Dale that they could use.
But there's not a brand new roof. We have 400,000 in proposed maintenance that's been delayed for Dale Street that someone will pay. We have the 2 million for Park and Rec. We have the remaining part of the Dale Street building. All we're asking for is the full cost to be included in this proposal on the true cost for the town.
Right, so our proposal would pay for that move of Park and Rec by utilizing the following funds that do not increase the tax rate or their planned expenses already. We have a capital maintenance program that already has money slated for that building, which we've held off on. And if we utilize those funds and utilize the $600,000 left in the public safety building being under budget, we believe that will be mitigated, and maybe not entirely, but it'll be below, well below 2 million and maybe below 1 million.
So can I ask on that, who decides to put that in front of the other capital projects that are, I mean, we've heard from the selectmen that we've got a whole bunch of capital needs. We put that budget there to take care of them. Why does this move in front when we could have MSBA pay to fix that building? Not add a new building to our inventory, which is what we're doing. We're adding a 95,000 square foot building, an additional one that will need maintenance, need support. And we're now adding a Dale Street building for Park and Rec. That's only partially for Park and Rec. The rest of it, we're gonna have to do something with,
Correct.
which will cost money.
Correct. But what this does is this solves the Park and Rec problem in the short term and allows us to get 8 or 10 years out of it before they need something more substantial. So rather than putting Park and Rec in a position where, like the FAF Center is way worse than Dale, and we know how bad Dale is. So this gives them a short-term solution that allows us to get down the line and a potential Park and Rec project that's maybe 8 or 10 years out, in which case the DPW bonds are coming off the books and the public safety building starts to come off the books. And then the town is in a better position to be able to fund the Parks and Rec project. So ultimately, the plan would be, if it's acceptable to the selectmen, would be to put them in there temporarily at an absolute minimum cost, and then eventually do a more substantial renovation for them and put a more modern gym in. But that would be 8 or 10 years after they move in 2024, if that plan proceeds.
So the two options for Dale, and by the way, on record with the warrant committee, we just asked for the best proposals for an ad reno and new construction. So the proposal that we're asking for those two buildings, the new construction, the PSR is about 5 million less than the new construction now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if we use the Dale Street building for a school, which it has done well, doesn't that mean that we have 5 million less in tax impact that we could use for some of these other things like?
Well, if you're saying use the Dale Street building for the school?
Yes.
I think he's saying the location.
That's the ad rental then. That's
New
an 80
construction,
million.
which
That was
leads
an
me to
80
the
million.
proposals that were done for the Dale Street location. So both proposals that the town was given as final options took the middle field. Correct?
There were 3 options explored in Dale.
The
There were
final two
two-
proposals took the field, correct?
Can I finish? There were 2 new building proposed, and those would have to go in the field because of the size of the site. You can't build a new building anywhere else on that site. The other option that was explored was the ad rental. The ad rental was not $5 million cheaper. The ad rental was more expensive. It did, as you have pointed out, it did get more reimbursement, but in the grand scheme of things, it would have been more expensive to the town to do the school as an addition and renovation.
Okay, so what we had asked last year is instead of taking those fields, which was what we as a town asked them to do, so we have a document that showed build on the open field. The alternative, which I did a video yesterday and I sent you, is to do new construction, demolish the current Dale Street building. That 98,000 fits on the Dale current, keeps the current
It
field.
could, in some configuration, sure.
I took the E1 configuration and moved it over.
We did not explore demolishing the school and using temporary modulars for the period of 30+ months that would take, because there was a desire, and I believe from yourself as well, to keep the building.
No,
The feedback we got at the time was that the town wanted to save the building. And even if it wasn't for the school, that there was an interest in the building being saved.
so the ad reno gives us that option. A new construction option that would be clean is the trade-off, a new field, right, which we don't support. I was president of youth baseball and softball. I don't want to take that field. We spent $500,000 to build the dugouts and renovate that field. So why wasn't the town provided the options to use the existing footprint, use the swing space, which, by the way, for 30 months, students are going to remain in the Dale Street building, which we're being told is dilapidated and they need to get out as soon as possible. In the model we're suggesting, using Blake and Wheelock, you have some modulars, you use common space. Well, that's what we're proposing, at least to see as a town.
So
We have a right to see that.
Dr. Marsden has addressed why that can't be done. Why you
No,
can't
he
move-
didn't. He had addressed the classrooms. I'm saying add modulars at those sites for the classrooms. And we are 600 students under capacity from 2005. And we get those students out of Dale Street, which is leaking, needs maintenance. We get them out immediately. We don't wait 30 months. When you
It's
do
not
that,
about
the
waiting
phase-
30 months. It's about, that's how long it would take to do the ad reno. Or if
No.
you're talking about a new build,
fall
it would
20.
take 30 months to demolish that building, assuming it's unoccupied. To abate and demolish that building and build a new structure in its place is a 30-month project.
Well, it's, if you're not doing phasing, which is 4 months and what you,
I know this from experience because I'm doing it right now in Ashland. We are going to be building a new school behind the school and demolishing and abating the building once the new school is open. That is a 30-month project.
so the PSR, the document that was provided, is inaccurate.
I don't know what you're referring to. What part of the PSI? It's like
I'm
59.
going with it, but we would like the SBC to answer these questions. We've been asking for a year to give us 2 Dale Street options that are the best ones, the most cost-effective ones. We're at 82 million for this project. We think the town, before voting on that, should see 2 Dale Street options, an ad reno and the new construction. They give us the best choices for the town. And all we've seen is what was presented last year. We've raised all kinds of issues and we've been cut off on this. There's a video, I encourage anyone to watch it, which is posted on Concerned Citizens, that goes through in detail these questions.
What's concerned citizens? I'm just kidding. Jerry, I appreciate that. Generally speaking, what we were, I'm not on Facebook, I promise. What we were asked to do, okay, I'm just talking for me now, because what we were asked to do was to find the best option for the town. Okay, so I can understand that you really want the Dale Street, I got it. We explored options there, and we did do what you just proposed. Options for Dale Street, we had an ad reno. Well, just listen, hold on, you talk. Hold on.
No, time out. We are not devolving into a screaming match. Let,
Interrupting, I can't even hear.
So,
So if you can say,
again,
I can say, yes, they did.
I'm just.
Why is you being louder? and making sound?
okay, please, order, please. I get that people are very passionate about this and I appreciate that, but we should not be yelling at each other.
Yeah, and I just talking for me here, like, so I appreciate where you're coming from. But I'm just, how I understood it from my perspective was what you just asked exactly for options at Dale. Okay, yes, we did not have a forum like this because we were in the middle of the pandemic. That said, there were public meetings, which you attended. We did do that, and we priced those options. And we weighed the options of what was best for the town. Now, I know you don't agree with what, I know you don't agree with the decision we made as far as site selection. I got it. But that said, what you just specifically spent 5 minutes asking We did. And we-
Respectfully, you did not. The vote that took place during the site discussion, we were told to wait until the final selections and that there would be public forums, multiple, for us to ask the questions. We're a year later, and the first dialogue that took place where there was actual discussion back and forth was the warrant committee a week and a half ago.
Yeah, but the
That's
one-
what we asked for after the town meeting. All we were trying to do, and I will sit down after
You
this.
guys sat down and watched the pros and cons sheet that we put up there that we all answered for months on both sides and every configuration, every scenario. We even did where the sun was gonna cast a shadow from the 3-level building. Because don't forget, at that time, we were still considering a 3-grade level building, which I guarantee you, if this gets pushed forward another year, we're gonna need to push forward for, because there's gonna be 700 units at the hospital hill.
No, see,
So
this is a scare technique.
No,
There's
this is not a scare tactic.
It is.
This is actual practicality.
There are 190 units that are single.
Order.
Well, I would like it factual. If you're
So-
presenting the town the best options, don't.
So
use
let's
the scare
talk about the sheet that we did review, where we were taking pictures and predicting where the sun was gonna cast a shadow over the neighbor's house. We were gonna actually have to park all the cars, park all the cars for all the staff that are actually gonna have to work there. Now, let's talk about if we actually have an event there. Has anybody been to Memorial and had an event at Memorial? Who parks in the parking lot? Nobody does. You know why? Because they're up and down Adams Street. If you think that that's going to improve by putting a larger building on that site, with the site configurations that we need, and that we didn't take that into consideration in our decision-making, then you're being insulting.
Okay, all right, let's not let this devolve.
And-
Jerry, I'm gonna ask
and-
you, let me finish, please. I'm gonna ask you to wrap up your statement
Yep.
or question. If you have a question, please state it. If you have a statement, please keep it brief. We have people
I
who also would like
understand
to
that,
speak.
and again, this has been the past year, the way it's been handled, so I think an $82 million decision deserves this kind of dialogue, and we can disagree, I'm not raising my voice.
You're welcome to get to the back of the line. I'm not stopping you from doing that, but there are other people who would like to hear, and just standing up there dominating the microphone is not fair to them.
But if you have a question, to ask me.
And I'm offering you the opportunity.
We would like the SPC to delay this vote, to give 2 Dale Street options as was voted on at town meeting, and was never considered 2 real Dale options with the request we've made. We think it's significantly cheaper. The bottom line in the MSBA, the very first line in the PSR says that that building meets all of our educational requirements. It says it, we filed it with the MSBA.
No one's.
So it's simply, it does. It's the very first line.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Jerry.
I would like to see those 2 options. We think we've raised issues that are worthy of dialogue for the town, and then the town can vote whether they agree.
Thank you, Jerry.
The problem,
Thank you.
Jerry, no, good question.
It's,
Tracy Fida, 23 Hawthorne Drive. I just want to say that as I'm listening to Jerry and, telling all these figures and saying 11 plus 2 plus 5, I'm just having a hard time following it. And I have been involved and, coming to meetings and, doing my research. I guess I just want to say to everyone who's not here, who might be listening, we're at the point now where I do think there are scare tactics, but I think that they're on your guys' side. And when they say that, give us this, give us this, I disagree with them. I feel that you guys have given, the town, not just them, it's the town, it's all of us together. I feel that you have done a good job of giving us the information. And we are at the point now, and whoever wants to vote against this is more than welcome to vote against this. And so that's why we're here, to get concrete facts and information. And we are at the point where to sit there and say, okay, if we do this, we do this, we do this, like I could throw out scenarios as well. I think it just is confusing and muddies the waters. We're at the point now where this is coming up for a vote, this 82 million, it is a lot of money. But then to sit there and say Hospital Hill and this, yeah, everyone has budgets and budget constraints, just in any household, our town has the same. And so, yeah, we are gonna have votes coming up, but the bottom line is we need a new school. We can't sit there and say, okay, let's throw this all out and let's do this. We are down the road, we need to vote. That Dale Street School is 80 years old. The town of Medfield, one of the biggest draws is our school. I'm from out of state. I have many friends who are from out of state. I just met someone today who moved here. Guess what? First thing we all did was Google good towns and good schools. And that's why I bought here. And so to sit there and say, okay, we can wait and we can wait and we can wait another 5 years, people are gonna go to all those other towns that are building new schools, so to not have to deal with this. So I think you guys have done a great job. I think that, just to sit there and throw things out and to say, we need a new bridge, or we're gonna be forced to get a new bridge on Elm Street, and we've got this and this. Yes, we do have that stuff, but that has nothing to do with the price of tea in China right now. We all know that that stuff is coming, but we're voting on a new school. And I just want to thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Warren from 10 Dyer Drive. I don't know if this is more a Warren committee question, but like practically, when we go issue the debt, so this is the first question is tactical, and then I want to go more into just strategy of the vote and where we're going. So we have, I forgot what the total is, but a bunch of other debt outstanding right now. Is there an opportunity to wrap some of the existing debt into this issuance and then refinance it, or does that need to be separate for this?
It's gotta be separate, because it was voted on for specific use, and unless there's something I'm not aware of.
I mean, there's always, we just did it when we issued bonds for the water tower. We did refund, we were able to refund bonds from 2007 and 2010. I have no idea if we'll get a better interest rate than what we have, or whether there'd be a market for that. So that really depends on, we didn't know even going into the bond issuance, whether there would be a market for the refunding of the bonds from 2007 and 2010. And we anticipate if the bonds were issued in January, we'll get a favorable interest rate based on the heavy interest in the bond issuance we made this last week. But the
Which
refunding,
was-
that kind of happens at the time.
Which was 1.46%. So you can see even the scenarios we're looking at are, above that. So I believe we're being safe and conservative in our current estimate based on the advice of bond counsel, bond advisors.
I think it's right. I want to come back to that, but I think one of the things that I've talked to neighbors that people don't get the process from here forward.
Mhm.
Right? So if you play out the scenario, so the scenario on this page in terms of the passes, happy path, right? New school in September 24. And you're likely out in the market issuing debt this January.
December, January, the advice we've gotten from our advisors is that they're recommending we borrow as soon as possible, given where the interest rate market is today.
Yep.
So they're suggesting a December 2021 to January 2022 bond issue.
So yeah, the Fed's out today, the dot plots are moving where the interest rates are gonna move quicker, so that becomes a big consideration. I didn't even know this. But the not happy path of, okay, vote fails in November.
Mhm.
So the next step after that is a potential reconsideration and then another vote. So
Only if it's close enough that we think that the second vote may change something. If the vote at town meeting is 50-50, it's unlikely we're gonna convince 17% of the electorate to change their minds. But we do have a 120-day window, should we choose to revote at town meeting. And there are some things we can do to, potentially reduce cost or something like that, but that would be in the realm of like $1 million or $2 or something like that we could try to do, but it's not gonna drop, $10 million or something like that. And that would have to be the same project. It has to be the same exact project.
So I think that's one of the questions, because I think people think that this is Wheelock or Dale, but it's not.
It's a yes or no vote on this.
Wheelock. And I guess, so help me through the Dale path, right? So it's at some point early next year, you would have to come back to town meeting for a new feasibility study appropriation, is that right?
Correct. So if there's a no vote and it's not even close, then our option is basically to withdraw from the MSBA program and resubmit an SOI. The earliest we'd be able to do that would be April of next year. And then we would have to be invited back into the program. And so at a minimum, that's a 3 to 4 year delay.
And
To get back to a point where we would have another vote.
3 to 4 year delay from opening, or 3 or 4 year delay from the vote?
Both, because it would take 3 to 4 years to get back to another vote, and then it pushes the entire project out that same 3 to 4 years.
So the school is
So if
60
you want to do Dale, the earliest that you could do it would be sometime like fall of 20.
30,
20, what's that?
6 years. It's a 2-year project plus 4 years of.
Well, the current path has us opening the school in the fall of 2024. So a 3 to 4 year delay would put us at 27 to 28, depending on when we get invited back into the MSBA program.
Currently, the average is 5 years.
So
Can you say that loudly so everybody can hear it?
Currently, the average is 5 years it takes to get back to the same point.
Is-
where-
The MSBA the MSBA will take a look at this, and I'm not trying to,
From this date to when you get back to this.
so we can, we can,
All right, all right.
so hold on, I don't want this, I don't want, so we can talk about whether it's 3 years or 5 years. Basically, the MSBA, if the MSBA sees us and says that town is not ready to support a school project, they're not gonna be inviting us in next year saying, yep, we can try again. It's gonna take them time to say, all right, you guys, figure out what you're doing, get yourselves together, and then come back to us. And so it's gonna take a little bit of time, but, I don't speak for the MSBA. Is there a possibility that they let us in sooner than that? Maybe. That's up to them. But I would conservatively say it's a minimum of a 3 to 4 year delay. As Mike Weber referred to, the current market is absolutely nuts, and we're seeing what's going to be more than in excess of 10% between January 2021 to January 2022. Construction inflation is going to be north of 10%. Even if that goes back to a more normal 4 to 5%, a 3 to 4 year delay means a 16 to 20% increase for the same project. Same size, same things, it's gonna cost us 16 to 20% more 4 years from now.
That's right, and that's, so I think it's important for people to understand. And I guess the one of the follow, Mike, is, so if you sketch out like repairs and maintenance from, and right, I know we don't want to talk about this too much because we don't want to, the current building's unsafe, right? Everybody's making it work, but if you sketch out from now till 2028, 2029, the costs all need to be kept down in a shape where the kids can still.
Yeah, we can pull that together. We have a capital master plan that includes all the maintenance items. One of our former facilities director, Jerry McCarty, went through every single building that we own in town and put together a list of maintenance items and a projected time frame on when they would need to be replaced. I believe it was north of 50 million total.
That's about 40.
40, but that was also, again, that was what, 2017. So, that number has certainly gone up while we've tackled some of it. But so that just gives you an idea of all of the things that were identified, from roofs to windows to boilers, what things are nearing the end of their useful life. So we do have all that data. So we could, if you put a question into us, I'm sure we can pull together an answer and outline each of the items that are associated with the Dale building.
And do you guys have a sense from that, like how much would be throwing good money after bad? Because if you move the schools, you would be using it anyway, versus what would be needed to replace that department. Like theoretically, there's some leakage in that in terms of money we would be spending.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, that's a value judgment on what the town, if the town truly wants to save the building and can use it as an asset, which I think it can be, without throwing money away. There are certain things that will need to be done. I mean, there's 400,000 just for the portico, which has structural issues that would need to be addressed. So, but there's a desire in town, I believe, at least from what I've heard from people, to try to save that building. And the town for many years has never had any flexibility in terms of space. It's been more overcrowding. So having a little bit of flexibility with that building and not having it fully occupied as of 2024 would give us the ability to utilize it and renovate it in the future to give us more flexibility and all these other miscellaneous space needs that we have.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate all the guys' work that you were done and will continue to do. My personal point of view from a finance background is, like, with that, the way it is, and I've done the math, at a $50 million bond, every 1% is worth $10 million. It goes up to 60 is worth more. as the attack on inflation is working more. If you look at what the Fed came out with today, interest rates will be 2.5 points higher a couple of years from now than where they're at today. So you're talking just in interest, the town will be leaking $30-40 million more than if we went today.
That's an excellent point, because people often, they look at the price tag and they don't realize that the interest rate matters significantly to what the overall cost will be for the building.
This is the mortgage in our town. There's no one here who hasn't refinanced their mortgage.
Right.
Right, it's still money that's out of pocket in taxes regardless of what we do. So there's plenty of, for me, regardless of whether we argue over 1 million, 2 million, 5 million today, if we tackle this 4 years from now, it's not gonna matter. That's gonna be a drop in the bucket for what it ultimately costs us. So I think the town people should consider that with a great deal of care to think about the total cost. So,
Thanks.
thank you guys for all that you're doing. I appreciate it.
Mike Pastori, 6 Liberty Road. Thanks everyone for all your hard work. Mike, you touched on this just now, but I think it's a really important point, and it's one that I keep hearing come up. The MSBA doesn't just have a bag of money that's earmarked to Medfield for as long as we want it, correct?
That is correct. Ultimately, they don't have the ability to tie up funds forever. Now, they are very generous. We've extended this project 3 times already for different reasons. We extended it for when COVID hit. We extended it again when there was a desire to have more community forums around site selection in the fall. And then we extended it again after town meeting this year. So there were 3 2-month delays that got us to where we are today. I think when it all shook out, it was a little more than 6 months, but maybe I'm wrong, Lynn. But anyway, my point being that we have extended this project multiple times, and but not only is it not unlimited, but we have to pay our consultants, and quite honestly, and that's not the driver behind it, but we would need to appropriate more money for the further extend. So we feel, as the SBC, we feel that the project needs to be voted, and the town needs to decide whether they support it or not.
Thank you. And you showed a slide with a number of stars that showed other communities in the area that are either in the process or soon get in the process.
Yep. So not all of these are elementary schools, but we actually, in my office, we finished Millis a couple of years ago. Walpole is in design. That's a middle school. Norwood is a middle school. Westwood is an elementary school. Needham finished Sunita Williams back in 2017, I believe. Wellesley, we have 2 projects there. One that's MSBA and one that isn't. They're replacing 3 elementary schools with 2. Natick just replaced their middle school. Framingham, do you remember, Lynn, you gave me Framingham. I'm not familiar with that project. Middle school. Ashland, I'm working with right now. They're building an elementary school for their grades 3 to 5. Hopkinton built argued with who hit the MSBA, saying they saw more growth, and the MSBA said, no, we don't see it. They added 4 classrooms during construction, where they were still able to open the building on time, on their own dime. 3 years later, they're out for 4 more classrooms. So, I know there's been a lot of discussion about enrollment, but most towns are arguing for more from the state, not less, and saying we don't want more money, we want less
My
money.
guess is there's probably some towns that aren't on that map that are interested in the next year or 2. And that
Potentially.
if we don't go forward now, the MSBA might be.
Oh, every year, there are many more districts that submit SOIs than get accepted. I believe we were one of 15 or 16 that were, 13 that were accepted in the year out of 80 applications, if I remember correctly.
And that was our 3rd try.
And that was our 3rd try. We originally submitted a statement of interest in 2012 under the previous superintendent. And then when Jeff came and got situated, we submitted a statement of interest in 2016. We were rejected in 2017. They came and did a site visit, and they were like, okay, yeah, you're in. So, and then we were accepted into the program.
So it's not a scare tactic to say that we're at risk here, that we're going to, if we postpone this any further, we lose MSBA.
I mean, I don't speak for the MSBA, so I'm not going to say what the MSBA will or won't do.
But there's a risk.
There's always risk. There's risk either direction. So there's always risk. Yes, thanks, man.
Scotty, 10 Green Street. Just going back to the 3 buildings, adding one that's a liability. Currently, we have 3 buildings we're talking about, Half Center, Dale Street, and Wheelock. So now, according to the conversation, if we add a building to Wheelock, we have an extra building that's a liability. Well, right now, we have 2 liabilities, the Half Center and Dale Street. So if we build at Wheelock, and Half Center can go into Dale Street, we're at we still have the same number of buildings because Half Street would be gone and it's no longer a liability in the town. Is that correct?
The FAF Center is slated for demolition.
Yes.
It's just a matter of when.
So it's not like we're adding an additional building that's a liability because that one's a huge liability right now.
I mean, one of the things that we looked at closely when we were looking at this project is, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the enrollment and why it's, you know, so large and will that growth come? But part of the reason why we selected Wheelock is because if we're building that capacity that on day one, we won't need, but there, you know, maybe growth coming, we can then absorb growth for Wheelock and the new school in that new building. So there's a potential because of that connected 2 to 5, 4-year, 4-grade range. If we saw an increase of 10% in enrollment, not only would that work for the 4th and 5th grade, but we could use that excess capacity for the 3rd grade, and we could have classrooms that could be right next door. So that gives us the flexibility long-term to absorb enrollment growth at 2 schools, whereas the same doesn't hold true. We couldn't put Memorial kids into a 4th and 5th grade. So that we wouldn't be able to absorb that same capacity. So that was another driver on why we selected.
And with the Park Center going into, or Parks and Rec going into Dale Street, that's a larger central location in town for children to be able to get to on their own, walking and biking without having to worry about transportation from somewhere, as well as for seniors and the other classes that are going on. So it seems to me this just isn't a benefit for, you know, Parks and Rec for Parks and Rec, you know, for some of their programs. I think this is a benefit for the entire town because of what we will get for 10 years before another one is done. And maybe that site will be extended for the Parks Center and Parks and Rec because of its location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I want to follow up, and this is where I'm so glad when I stop on Zoom, we don't have to be.
Sure, I agree with you.
Because there's more than, where it's frustrating using the chat box is what I'm gonna be able to do right now that you can't do in the chat box. Is, Mike, you made a comment, and you and I have had this dialogue meeting about the MSBA failed vote. It reads right on the website, this is an Eileen Murphy making it up. It literally says, what if the vote fails? So what if the vote fails? You have 10 days to.
So if the vote fails, and I've outlined this in a couple.
But I just wanted one to know, because when you made the comment before, you had 120 days. You do have to respond in 10 days.
We have to respond on how we are going to move forward. We have to let them know how we would like to move forward. And they give us the option to revoke the project within 120 days. So we would have to notify them of that and our plan to do that. That is an option to revote this project.
And why do you think the second vote
Would be successful. And if they agree, they give you the 120 days to revoke the project.
Or as I know some people have reached out to the MSBA with the frustration that because we couldn't have this type of healthy dialogue as we approach the, there's so many of my friends will say, how come we never saw a solid comparison of same school, not a larger school, not like true apples to apples, not apples to oranges, because we know that the building that's being proposed for Wheelock would fit under, right? So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I apologize. I'll tell you the exact same thing I told Jerry. We saw a 98,000 square foot school on the Dale Street site with costs. And we saw one at Wheelock, same exact size with costs. So when you say that, it's just disingenuous.
No, I took the open field. It was not the same location.
Jerry.
But that's why I'm saying, so if you literally, and answer this question, please. If you took the current Dale Street school and just leveled I live on Metacomet, the house across the street, they leveled that pretty quick. So I'm thinking if they got out of school June 17th, would it take 3 years to tear it down? No, they're knocking down bricks and they bring in, I'll give it a 2-month tear. Okay? So,
It's not the same thing. This is not a house.
no, I know that, no, trust me. I've
And
already-
there's hazardous
I-
materials in the
I-
building.
Regardless, hold on, please, go ahead.
But just let me, just humor. So you level that area, however long, and if there is asbestos, which I know the house on Metacomet Street, okay, you've got a whole other layer. You have that in Fast Center as a head of Park and Rec, which I'll deviate and say, it's an insult that this poor Park and Rec group in town that generates revenue has been trying to get a new building since the early 2000s, late 1990s.
I'll applaud that. I completely agree with you,
Like,
but that's
so,
just
so
my
I don't think
take.
Dale Street is not, that is an absolute insult to the youth of this town that doesn't play lacrosse, that doesn't play football. Someone wants to play ping pong, wants to learn how to cook. Like, we've got to give them a better building. And
I
Dale Street
agree.
is not the solution. That's sad, but that's really.
It's
what
a
we're giving
short-term
hand off.
solution.
And I did offer the Park and Rec tonight, the building that was proposed at McCarthy Park, which we're going to have a lot of activity up there. We're going to have new development. You could do a cut through from the senior center, so the seniors could have access to it, along with all the fields that are around there. And I hear Sundays are crazy up there. So, I mean, that's not a horrible location to have Park and Rec actually where the fields are today, which is what they're responsible for from the athletic standpoint, but then have a great building. The kid that doesn't want to play baseball wants to do something else. But I just think it's really important that we're going to share information, and it's not, I don't want to use the scare tactics and the spin, but there are the 10 days says, okay, the MSBA, no one's ever been through COVID before. They may say, okay, we respect what Medfield's doing. We're hearing from the community that maybe there is something they should be taking a step back and looking at. I'm not saying it's ever going to change, but I don't think we've had the healthy discussion and had people had a chance to truly vocalize what their concerns are. And as I said, when I was up here before, as a taxpayer, there are a lot of other costs coming. And I've been in Medfield for 21 years. So when we went new to Medfield, look at what homes were appraised at, and we're not getting a lot of base revenue. So our taxes keep going up. And I don't want to see, think about all the things that we could be putting towards education if we're not putting it into infrastructure that's brick and cement versus going into educational IT things. And I'll leave it as one note. Again, having been here as long as I have, and I'm hearing the commentary about relock, we could take advantage of the outdoors. We don't spend it for a really, really, really long time. And I've been walking my dog for almost 10 years up there, and I've never seen the kids leave to go do any sort of outdoor classroom stuff. Why haven't we, if it's so important to do it, why haven't we done it? We have two schools that are really close to one another, Memorial and Dale, and we don't do much between those two, and they're not that far apart. So I'm really scratching my head with why all of a sudden we're going to share resources when we have two schools that really aren't that far apart, and a school that's there today that we're not really taking advantage of the outside space. But now we're being told we're suddenly going to. I'll leave it at that.
What I can tell you, and the educators can speak more to it, what I can tell you is outdoor education has been proven to be very successful. Kids learn outside a lot better than they do inside. And there's, a million articles on it. And the opportunity is there to be able to do that at Wheelock, and with the Dale Street site, it's just much more constrained. So I will leave it at that, and Jerry, welcome back.
Like, the only other question I would say, the idea that maybe the MSBA will think Medfield's different, I don't know, it's kind of a risk that.
Well, that actually kind of-
Excuse me, Jerry. Yeah. That maybe they're gonna let it happen, with that no track record of doing so.
What I can tell you is the MSBA has told us in no uncertain terms that if the vote fails, that it is very unlikely that we would be able to proceed and that we would need to resubmit an SOI. Now, they don't speak in absolutes, and I'm not going to speak for them. That's what we've been told.
Well, the thing that scares me more is the cost, the increasing costs, the one million equal 1 million equal 10 million. To me, that was like that's
So,
scary enough.
Jerry, please feel free to sit down. We can move the mic. I don't want you to be standing
I
up.
don't get out much, so this is exciting for me to stand. So I actually this time want to start with what we agree as a community and try to work it this way. So no one that I know wants to fail vote. We don't want to fail vote. We really don't. I don't want to vote no.
Sure.
I will vote no right now, and strongly vote no, because the period we're in right now, I asked MSBA for a public information request of any time they have rejected an extension. And I know we have asked for a few extensions, but those extensions didn't address the question we asked at the town meeting. In fact, we never had a chance to sit down and go through this. My point is, we are coming up on a vote. And you said earlier, you don't think a Dale at Dale would pass.
That's not what I said.
No, I'm saying you're not sure. It's no certainty that.
There's no certainty, correct. There's no certainty that any project would pass overwhelmingly.
But here's what we asked a year ago, and now would be a really good time to do it. Do a vote, do a non-binding vote with the town. No, please, because, well, it's a less risky technique. I don't want to have a failed vote, but we've asked for a year to do outreach. You've done a survey, which showed 38% wanted a Dale. You said they didn't have enough information. I think now people have
Can I
enough
respond?
information. Why would we not, instead of forcing a vote that is risky, why would we not do outreach and actually solicit input? And if Wheelock's winning, then you know what? You're in great shape.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Okay. So let's say we did that, okay? And the vote came out 52-48. Okay?
Yeah.
So you're saying is that 48% is suddenly gonna say, well, the 52% won, so I'm just gonna get behind them because that's the way it should go. I don't see that. The fact is, not everyone is going to change their vote just because there was a slight majority. So it's not telling. The only way to have it be telling is that it's a yes or no on a single site. To put up two sites and say, all right, vote, it's gonna be inconclusive again.
We said a year ago, if you know going into this that half the town is against it and you push a vote that you need 2/3.
I don't know that half the town is.
Well, I'm just saying that's why we do it. If you end up getting 60% that supports you, then you know you've got a good chance and then we move ahead. But we have begged from last year on, just do outreach and ask the community, educate and ask. And there hasn't been one vote that shows that Wheelock is supported by a majority. That's a risk. It's a fact. Show me a forum
The same with Dale.
Yes, there is. There was a vote at town meeting that had more than half the town, whether you
Right, and
like it or not.
neither one is a super majority, and that was because you had your push to get as many of your supporters there as possible.
That's
People
actually
who
not true.
supported the school weren't
That's
there to support.
You had people calling, getting people who, we have an older contingency. They were leaving. I know at least 30 people who left because it was too late.
Jerry, you're missing the point. The point is.
Actually, you're missing the point.
No.
Well,
Jerry,
it's an important point. It's an $82 million project. Why go for a high stakes vote when you could at least do some outreach and listen to the town?
And
if
we,
you're
and we,
wrong-
and we feel like we've
if we're
presented
wrong-
plenty of opportunities for the town to provide us feedback. We've taken that feedback.
2/3 of the messages.
And
that went to the
ultimately,
selectmen were pro-Dale.
we had to make a recommendation and we've done that. And now the town can decide if they support it or not. I get it, you won't.
I want to be
You won't
clear.
support-
The
you won't-
SBC is
You
pushing
won't support any
this
school that's not
in a
a
high
town.
risk vote, knowing that there's a significant portion of the town that is against this and wants a school. That's on the SBC. It's not on us for
I don't-
speaking up as
You want to
citizens.
point fingers, Jerry,
I'm
point fingers.
telling you, this is
Thank
a
you.
foolish strategy.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin Stoddard, 6 Baker Road, cupcake questions. There's $2 million to fix Dale parking lot, demoing the fast center.
No, but again, the numbers, I should have more information, hopefully tomorrow. I'm waiting for some feedback from the estimators. But it does not currently include the demo of FAF. So that would be something we would have to explore if the town decides that that's what they want, how they want to
Yeah, I
proceed
think
with
I
that.
talked about using that, we should have that number as
Yep,
part of it.
we can get that number pretty
I
easily.
keep reading and hearing about over the past couple of years, improving the parking at Wheelock, making the front entrance better. If we don't put a school at Wheelock, two questions, how much of the 82 million is to make the parking situation on the existing school better?
2.1 million.
Okay, so if we don't build the school over there, is there a proposal or is it a?
It's on our maintenance, it's on our maintenance plan. So it's identified as a cost that we're gonna need to tackle sooner or later. And what we're saying is if we're gonna propose, we could take it out of this project, but that would be foolish on our parts, because you're gonna be, if we do approve this project, we're gonna be building a project right next to it. And solving that potential future problem as part of this project allows the traffic to circulate better around the site. Because then we would have a dedicated bus drop-off loop for both schools. and 2 parent drop-off loops, one for Wheelock and one for the new school. And that would solve our issues with the parking as well as address the stormwater issues or lack thereof, stormwater protection. on site.
So is that 2.1 billion, if we get reimbursement from the state, if we do it with this new school?
So again, with our site cost capped at 8%, we exceed that amount. So that is, we're always going to be paying for
So
that.
maybe instead of putting forth an $82 million budget, you should put something forth that's a little under 80 million. Because that's the cost of the new school without improving Wheelock, which you're gonna do anyway.
Well,
in the next couple of years.
well, what we're doing, what we're saying is we're proposing to do that work as part of this project for multiple reasons, because we feel that.
Right, I think, but in terms of positioning it before the town.
Yes,
This is something that has nothing to do with the new school, except it's beginning to fix it because there's this big construction
Right.
project going on.
it's a future problem unrelated to the new school that we're addressing as part of this project, that we're proposing to address as part of this project. So if we don't do the school,
One-to-one, we're reconfiguring the layout. So it's not like you're just repairing the existing parking lot
Right.
as is, it's changing the layout.
Right.
and adding a stormwater system and stormwater drainage system, et cetera.
Dr. Morrison, there's the Biden administration right now is proposing universal pre-K that's free for all 3 and 4-year-olds as part of its budget proposal, which before the end of the year, we'll have an idea as to how that goes. Do you have any insight as to who provides that service, that free pre-K?
Well, I would
Does the
think
school
that
system have to
the
provide
school
it?
system would have to provide it, and I think there'd be vouchers probably for private preschool. From what I've heard, but I haven't looked at a lot of that.
So with the existing footprint, whether you build a new school at Dale or you put it over at the Wheelock site, this is new since this project started. Would there be room to house all the 3 and 4-year-old pre-K students that would now have to be covered because of this new program?
Is that a question, would we have the room?
Well, is it being considered, or what would happen if, in a few months this goes through?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I've heard about universal free full-day K in preschool for about 15 years now.
Right.
So when I see it, I'll believe it. But I think that, there'll be mitigation in there where you wouldn't have to do it if you didn't have the space. There's so many districts that don't have the space, they could never just implement that wholesale and expect districts to do that. You just can't do it.
Okay.
If we did a 3, 4, 5, by the way, we'd be able to do it really well, but we aren't doing that project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up, because I want to, respect Ms. Smith. My personal opinion is the biggest problem with the town meeting vote was not that, one side won by 10 votes. The problem is that a town of 4,000 plus voting, residents, less than 10% of the town showed up. Right, and this is where I get challenged.
It's more like 8,000, so it's closer to 5%.
Whatever, you get the point.
Yeah.
No, it's-
Right, so the question isn't, the question is about, like, one, who's gonna show up, who's gonna care enough. I feel like that this entire debate has been the same 5% of the town banging their heads against each other. And like, the question ultimately may be, who's gonna show up to, make the decision and how important it is. Because my worry is that if all that happens is the same 5% show up every time, you can have 2.5% on each side. You never get to a super majority
That's a good question. How long have you been there?
in the top 8 years.
Okay, so back when Park and Rec did they were trying to get some money.
Yep.
In this school, the gym was at complete capacity. This was at full capacity. They lost the Park and Rec vote to get funding, the one vote. So when people become passionate, I wish, our top moderators, but okay, if it is such a volatile question, which is why it's special town meeting, because the entire thing is one vote. Trust me, this is, and I don't know how many people are on Zoom tonight, but if you have been at a town meeting where people become wildly passionate, you're gonna be in for an interesting experience. There's a lot of people show up for yes and for no. There's a lot of people that are involved, but they don't come to things like this. They may ask me, they may go on the website, but when it comes time to vote, they'll vote.
Honestly, I hope to goodness that is the case,
Yeah.
because I think the town needs it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like, what my biggest worry is just complete paralysis,
Oh,
right? And,
we won't, I can tell you, there's so many.
but I think that's where we're headed, like, if you just play out the logic, right? This vote fails because, you know, it gets 53% of the vote. Then you do the vote at Dale 4 years from now, you got 4 more years of wear and tear on Dale. There has to be a Dale option, you're not gonna do go redo a Dale. And you'll have 1,000 parents show up who are, all the kids are replacing modules for 3 years. And they're gonna say, no way, and you never get your supermajority. And now you're 10 years from now, and everybody's ready to leave the town, and we will not have the benefit of enjoying, right? Everybody's got a limited amount of time to spend in this town. And to wake up 10 years from now and realize that we've gone nowhere, I think it, as a community, it's the biggest risk that we have.
That's part of it.
I mean, that's, agree, it's, so I think they get down to, well, it's a cost. Well, no, it's not cost, because the longer you wait, the longer more it costs, so it can't be cost. So if it's not, excuse me, back up, please.
Do your paper and ask them to explain path 3. This will help you, this will help with your question.
Great. I think either way, you wind up in an area with more costs, so it can't be cost, and then it's Dell versus Wheelock. And it either, well, it is, it's not cost, it's either Dell or Wheelock site.
It's the dynamic of, if you think where it is today, or do you want people in the Wheelock area that do not want the traffic, the infrastructure, everything that's going to happen. So people are saying, you know what, works today, traffic works today, the whole infrastructure of the physical town. There's a lot of people that say, it's put a new school, don't put a new light bulb, put a new school, and it works. But, and so that's where you're really seeing is people saying that Halifax would be that we have some discussions, is let's really look at it. And then, as Mike has said, and I'm not gonna argue it, that there are some people saying, we don't, just not the right location, it's just straight up not. And then unfortunately, that's.
So,
All
all right, hold on. I don't want this to be my opinion, your opinion. That doesn't, well, we get it. People have opinions strongly one way or the other. But I don't think anyone who supports Wheelock is going to change the mind of anybody who supports Dale tonight. I really don't, or vice versa. So what I'd like to do is just talk about the information and the data on what's going to be voted on, because that's what's important to discuss. So and rather than getting into a back and forth about why your argument is better than his argument and vice versa.
Again, I would just end with the biggest risk we have is that sides can't agree, ultimately we get an action and we wake up 10 years from now with no school and a school that replacement will be triple what most of them.
You don't need to convince us.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Potts, 7 Kirk Street. I just would like to ask Mike, could you please just, because I think this is a very important question that really should have been more widely broadcast at your SBC meeting. Mike Marcucci actually asked when you guys had your path 1, path 2, path 3 of what you could follow, right?
Which meeting are you referring?
It was the SBC, it was,
Which one?
it was after the town vote.
If you tell us what the paths are, it'll.
Yeah,
jog our memory.
what path are you referring
You
to?
had 3, you had 3.
I don't have everything memorized. I
Laid out.
apologize.
You laid
Just
out-
remember my brilliant question, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I shouted. How could I forget?
Yeah.
So actually, Left Field helped with this. They laid out 3 possible paths that could be taken after the citizens petition from the town meeting vote.
Mhm.
Path 1 was to stay exactly on the path that you were on at that point in time and just keep plowing ahead.
Yep.
Path 2 was to ask for an extension from MSBA.
Mhm.
Well, we actually don't, you really don't need it to, because MSBA had that basically asked if you could push off the filing anyway, because they supposedly were overwhelmed. And then path 3 was,
That's not why we extended.
well, no, I'm just replaying the conversation off the top of my head. There was something about MSBA that asked if they were getting overwhelmed by.
They asked us to submit our submission early, not late.
Right, but I guess earlier. But they gave you flexibility in terms of the date, that you didn't have to stick to whatever the date was that you were.
No,
doing that.
they asked us out of courtesy because they had a large meeting planned for that month to submit our submission earlier, so they had more time to review it.
So then the third path was to delay this a year, to revisit the site selection, to possibly resubmit a new.
We would have had to ask the MSBA to withdraw our preferred schematic, to reevaluate, this is the path that I believe that you're advocating for, would have been to withdraw our PSR, redo it at Dale Street. It would have been a minimum of a 1-year delay to redesign and go through that. And then move forward with Dale. That's what you were asking for.
Right. So my question is, when you compare, okay, this is all a discussion because our selectman, Mike Marcucci, asked about this clarification, and I have it on tape. The time difference between a failed vote and getting back into the MSBA program, based on the report that I have from MSBA that shows it's a 2.5-year average. Based on,
Can I have a clarification? That is from when the vote fails and to when you get invited back in.
Not to the
It
next
doesn't
vote,
include the 2 years that we've just gone through.
to get back to a vote.
right, but I'm saying that everybody's been talking about, it's gonna take us 10 years to get readmitted to the.
I don't know, nobody on this panel has said 10 years. So when you say
I heard
everybody,
from a
that's
school
not us.
committee member, I heard it as school from a school committee member. And there,
But again, that's not
nobody
us.
corrected it. So all I'm saying is,
I have never
the
said 10
average
years.
time for, based on MSBA records in 2019 failed votes, it took an average of 2.5 years for a district to get readmitted to the program.
Okay.
That was the timeline. And even Tim mentioned it at that SBC meeting that he was playing around, he said 2 years basically to get readmitted. So you figure that it's 2 years minimum, right?
Minimum.
But if you took that path 3, you would only lose a year. And if MSBA has no record of saying no to an extension request, I mean, there are some districts, Boston
Chris,
is
let's-
on 4 years worth of
Let me
extension.
paint another scenario for you. We took path 3 and we went back and asked the town for the additional money to do the design on Dale, because they would have to pay for that money so that we could keep our wonderful consultants on payroll.
Mhm,
And we do the feasibility
mhm.
with that 98,000 at Dale. But we still came into the same problems. What is the vote that you would have been asking for 1 year from now?
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
So I'm asking, at the end of all that, what if we came to the same conclusion?
So let me give you 3 scenarios, okay?
Now,
I've
we
done
just
my-
took scenario 3. We don't need 3 scenarios. I just gave you the scenario that you asked for. You're asking us to go back and ask the town for $500,000. Go back to the same process we all just went through.
Okay, so guess what?
To come, what if we came to the same conclusion? Would you then?
I'm gonna base it, this is factual information. So there were
I'm asking you a
3
question.
I'm
Just
not
answer
gonna,
the
I'm not
question.
gonna try and predict the future, Leo. I'm asking a question based on factual information. There are 3 school districts, Ipswich, Hopkinton, and Tisbury, okay? And I have spoken to people who served on their school building.
I'm sure you
committees.
have.
And
I'm
I
sure you
talked
called
to
their parents and their grandparents.
And I've talked to people who were directly involved with these projects. Okay, Tisbury, Ipswich, and Hopkinton. People were adamantly opposed to the site selection. They all cited that the site selection was the reason for their failed votes. When they decided to choose a different site, those projects got overwhelming votes at their town meetings.
Can we,
And Tisbury,
can
in
we talk
fact,
about Tisbury?
Tisbury,
Let's talk about it.
so
So Tisbury voted down a $46 million project that was going to be $14 million reimbursed by the state. When they passed it, it's a $55 million project with 0 money from the state.
yeah, but guess what, Mike?
Is that the
People
path you
cared
want
so
for
much-
Medfield?
People cared so much about the site that it was worth them to spend the extra money because they care about the site.
So they
And what
spent
is
an
being
additional
missed is- what is
$23 million for a building. You're saying it's that important to you?
You know what? People have been surveyed on this topic. Go to Mass Historic Preservation. People, there is data on this topic. People have, people have revoted a new site for these projects because they care about the very things that we care about. They care about open space. They care about water. They care about having kids in the downtown at school. These were all factors that played in to why people wanted those sites in those schools.
I will absolutely
talked-
acknowledge that you do not support any project that's not at
No,
Dale
I'm
and
talking
that
about the
you,
reality here. We're talking about a difference between losing.
you don't need to
one-
point at me like I'm some
No,
sort
I'm
of,
saying, we're talking.
we can have a
about
conversation.
losing 1 year versus, we know it'll be.
But you're
1 year.
also, but that's not what you were asking. You were asking us to change our minds. You were asking us to say, all right, we agree with you now. We want to pursue an option at Dale.
No,
That's
No.
what, that's true. You
no.
were asking for a full PSR at Dale.
No.
That's what she just said. That's what
And
she just said.
Jerry, you said you wanted
Jerry,
two
you said
options,
it.
right?
You said
At
you wanted it a
Dale.
year ago. We had two
At
options.
Dale. You didn't say explore more options that we want. We get, no, look,
They wanted it
we
there.
get, you don't agree, but you can't sit there and say, if for you it's a value judgment and you say the site is $23 million more important, like Tisbury did, then you go right ahead, but I don't agree with you. This SBC doesn't agree with you. The Board of Selectmen didn't agree in terms of site selection. The school committee didn't agree in terms of site selection. Sorry, Dan, this keeps going out on me. So we listened, we heard what you had to say, but all of the points that you presented were all points that were presented when we made our site selection.
And you know, in
And
every one
so-
of these towns.
So there was no new
you're
information. Can I finish, please? Can I finish? There was no new information presented at town meeting that wasn't presented in the fall. Everything that you outlined in all of your bullets were all things you outlined in the fall and that we took into account. And we made our decision. And I'm sorry if you disagree with that, but we are standing by our decision.
It's not my disagreement, Mike. All I'm saying is that I've looked at these other districts and I've talked to people in those districts and people who've been involved with these school projects and have reflected on the failed vote. Universally, every single one of these people that was involved on their SPCs or involved in the projects have said that they actually made this very request to their town leaders and it was ignored and they were frustrated by it. Because
Okay,
it could have been,
thank
we
you.
could save the MSBA reimbursement, lose 1 year and still be ahead. But
No,
I don't think
No,
we'll be
you-
ahead. I think we'll be short a building actually in the long run, just a usable space that this town is probably gonna need. When
so
we talk about Parks and Rec, that will not have another space, especially if we spend another 23 million out of our pocket. Parks and Rec won't be see a space till 2050.
All right, come on. Chris, thank you. I've given you plenty of time. If you can get in the back of the line, there are others who would like to speak as well.
very
No.
specific, 2-second question. When is the project scope and budget conference?
September 27th.
27?
Yes, that's right, right? The project scope and budget conference is a procedural meeting to talk about how we move forward, what's the status of the project, and what documents need to be completed for the board vote at the end of the.
Okay, and but there are town officials that can be part of that meeting.
That's correct.
Yes, okay. So my other question is, the feasibility study money has run out, and I know we exchanged some messages on this in the meeting. So the feasibility study has, money has run out. My understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that the money that the time and effort that we're incurring now from Left Field and Arrow Street is being done pro bono?
It's all absorbed in their pre-construction and in their feasibility study fees. So yes, they,
Okay, so.
this is the unfortunate reality of MSBA work. This is what I do professionally as well. Unfortunately, the early phases are loss leaders. You often invest far more time and far more effort than you're getting paid to, including our consultants from Left Field and Arrow Street. They have invested an inordinate amount of time, but they're not being reimbursed for it.
So it's not rolling, if this passes, it's not gonna roll into the costs of going forward?
We have their proposed fees already for the next phases. We're still negotiating that. That won't be established until we have a project that
Is
we
it
don't.
possible it's gonna include the make up the fees for the last 2 months?
have the fees been incurred today?
Sir, if you wouldn't mind, if you wouldn't mind, we're trying,
Just getting on that point.
we have a $1 million feasibility study agreement, feasibility study budget, and that is the exact amount that has been consumed.
Okay, so did you, I couldn't tell from the SBC meeting, you had proposed $70,000 of legal fees, is that included?
Yes.
It did, okay.
You don't
We
email
decided
that
to
thing?
carry on with administrative.
Where's the 1 million?
No, sorry, we're not going to be bouncing back and forth, please, sir. There's a microphone, there's a line of people waiting to ask questions. And Chris, I'll give you one more question, but we need to be able to share the mic with other
Okay,
people.
so it's been stated that The other things that are gonna be delayed are the Mass Historical Commission
What,
mandated.
who said the Mass Historical Commission will be delayed?
The protection plan.
No protection. That.
Oh, yes, we're not gonna design the protection plan if we don't have a project.
Exactly. And then you had also mentioned that the base soil studies would also be delayed after this.
Again, we don't want to spend money unless we have to.
I understand, but my question is, are the costs for that?
Built into the
factored in?
budget, yes.
Yes, where are they on the budget?
There's a whole mess of different line items I can.
But just the general line item.
The soil studies are under geotechnical and geoenvironmental. We don't specifically have a cost budgeted for the protection plan of the archaeological site that is adjacent to our site, not within it. That money would come out of contingency. I'm sorry, Chris, we've got to move. You can get back in line and continue to ask questions.
Because this was admitted from, this has been admitted. So my question is on sewer costs. There was a
Chris, last question.
There was a statement made. Now I know that there's replacement of a water main, right? As part of the cost.
There's a 1 mile replacement to upsize the water main from 4 inch to 6 inch to 8 inch.
Okay, so can you just explain what's the sewer line impact on the cost of that?
Nothing.
There's nothing?
Nothing. There's a sewer connection point, but there's already a sewer that runs down the street. All we're doing is connecting to it.
That was-
But I don't have the specifics around what that connection from the building to the street would cost.
Okay, I'm just trying to send something I saw on social media about this.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I made some mic about painting, so hopefully I get I'm Margot and I'm from Medfield. I'm also a fifth grade teacher at Dale. This is not my wheelhouse. Gives me a lot of anxiety to be up here in front of adults, but I felt it was important enough to start off by thanking the administration and the board. I do feel that we were given a lot of opportunities to share what we needed, and I thought we were very respected in the process. So I want to thank Dr. Marston, Mr. Branham, and all of the other people who visited our schools. Excuse me. No one in this building right now probably loves Dale Street more than I do. If they do, come talk to me after. I met my best friends in 4th grade, Mrs. McKechnie. That's why I chose to come back and teach at Dale Street. So I'm trying to stick in question A and not make this a special more of a moment. But I do think a couple of things I can answer for people is one, I think we're all given a fair voice. And if people didn't speak up within our school, I think you would find that in any building, in any company, in any corporation, some people are just not comfortable. And that's just the nature of work and workplaces. I feel that we've been very respected, more so than maybe other former administrations that I've worked with and under. But I do also want to clear up is the outdoor space question. Outdoor space is absolutely imperative for kids in the 4th and 5th grade for several reasons. One, I work with a lot of students with ADHD and having it myself. I know that kids need breaks and we take plenty of breaks. We go outside, teaches them respect for nature. I think COVID has given us more opportunities to build it in, and it's been working. When you watch 4th graders and 5th graders play at recess, they're not on a swing set. Most of them are aside. They're playing soccer, flag football. Many other games, which I'm still trying to understand, but I think it builds on the social piece for those kids that maybe younger kids don't necessarily need yet. It brings up a lot of teachable moments, such as today when a student said, I don't normally play soccer, but today I did, and it was really fun. To answer some questions in regards to this whole project being in whether it's 2 years, 5 years, I don't have that type of energy to fight or argue. It's sad to me that we've been in this town for 31 years, I don't know, 38 years. That it's come down to this. I think we are lucky to be in the opportunity we are, to be fortunate to have in this school. And I think regardless, I can speak for myself and most of my colleagues, we're grateful that this has even come to this point. We've waited a long time and I don't think any of us have complained. But it just breaks my heart to think I just had a baby, she's 5 months old, that she might be 10 years old, or 8, or 7, or 3, 6. Jerry, I respect your opinion. I respect you, and this is hard for me because a lot of people on the opposite side of this are friends, family members. I want to be respectful of both sides, but I think we've kind of gotten away from the issue here. To me, I'm a simplified elementary school teacher. We make things simple. I don't understand how it's arguing back and forth at this point. The teachers have told you what we feel is best. Do I love Dale Street? Absolutely. Do I have a lot of memories there? Yes, but let's let these kids have their own memories in a new school with golden opportunities for them. That building has had its days. It's time to move on. Change is hard. Change is hard. And we're stomping and we're stomping our feet and we're berating each other on social media. I don't appreciate people speaking up because the teachers are afraid to speak. I'm afraid to speak on social media because I'm afraid of what comes to asking the backlash from people. I'm not afraid. I'm the superintendent. I'm not afraid of the principal. I have a great relationship. And I just want to speak for myself and not the whole team of Dale Street teachers. But I think that we have to focus on what's best for kids. And if the community forum is a better place for me to share that, I'll be there. And I know that, you know, this is a tough decision. I love Dale Street. That building is not right anymore. But the space to have a 3-story building and the traffic, when I talk about traffic, I'm on Oak Street. I get the middle school traffic, the high school traffic. It's, to me, a happy moment that we're in a town where kids can be driven to school by their parents and teenagers are in cars with their friends. If it's 15 minutes of traffic, and that's my biggest problem of the day, I sit at the light at Starbucks and wait today for 3.5 minutes to find it. Because some guy wanted to go in and get a latte. And I'm like, all right, well, if that's my biggest problem of the town, and that's my biggest problem today. I waited 3 minutes at the Starbucks light. I live 0.8 miles from the school. Kids will still walk to town from Yale. It will be good exercise for them, better than going from Dale Street. Those sidewalks with all those kids flying around is dangerous. I've seen it on half days. I don't even send my child to the middle of the town for daycare because I don't like how fast people are driving in and out throughout the town. I warn the kids every half day, please know when people are on their phones driving, they don't know what the halfway. I don't know what else to question or answer. I guess I didn't touch on any questions or answers, but I'm telling you, I'm speaking from my heart tonight, that we have to get back to the basics here. Yes, taxes. I'm a single income household. My dad does not pay my taxes, I do. I will pay $100 extra a month and find that money if it's for the benefit of my daughter and all these kids who are waiting. These kids are waiting and they're happy kids. They deserve something better. And we deserve something better as taxpayers. And we're
very much, and not just for your speech, but for all the work that you guys do for our kids.
Sorry.
No apologies needed.
Jeff Harmon, on the street. Actually, want to ask a cost question. Can you go back to?
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand. For me, I like to understand the cost per square foot, just to understand it. So, and I don't know what number you use. Is it the 82 million divided by 98,000?
No, when we're, typically we're looking at the construction cost, not all the soft costs per square foot. That's typically a way to compare.
I can't see it. So what is it?
It's for Medfield, it's $673.
So should this move forward, you mentioned net zero, having some familiarity with the cost of net zero, well drilling, lots of infrastructure. Is that in the number?
So
right now,
I'll give you a little detail on that. So what's in the number is utilizing an all-electric building. So no fossil fuels will be stored on site. No fossil fuels will be used for heating or any other purpose. So it'll be an all-electric building. It'll be heated and cooled by a geothermal well system, which is what's called a ground source heat pump, where basically water is piped down 600 feet into the ground where the temperature is more consistent. And in the winter time, it's warmer than the outside air. So they bring that heat up and it's used to heat the building. In the summertime, the opposite is true. The outdoor air is much warmer, the earth is much cooler. Use that to heat and cool the building. So that is built in, as well as a lot of other things like additional envelope, making sure the envelope is tight and well insulated, which is a key first step, the roof, et cetera, so that you're not spending or using more energy than you need to. So the first step is minimizing the energy use. The next step is utilizing systems that can utilize renewable energy. And ultimately, to get from net zero ready, which is basically what's called a sub 25 EUI, EUI meaning energy use index, basically the amount of BTUs per square foot per year that are used to in the building for not just heating and cooling, but for lights, for technology. You need to be below a 25 EUI to be considered net zero ready. And then to make up for that energy you do use, that 25, you would utilize a renewable energy source. So typically in Massachusetts, that means utilizing photovoltaics. That is not built into this currently. We are looking into whether that would be done. I believe that the current plan would be to do that through what's called a PPA, or power purchase agreement, where we would contract with an outside vendor to provide the photovoltaic panels at no cost to us. They would sell us the electricity back to us at a severely discounted rate. So ultimately, to get to quote unquote net zero, all of the energy consumed by the building is then being generated either on site or through, there's other ways to do it through like contracting with a photovoltaic farm in the middle of New York or something like that. But basically utilizing renewable energy for the energy that the building does use. But currently, photovoltaics are not part of the project.
So I appreciate that. So when you talk about the wells, I think there's a number of wells based on the square footage. Does the engineer know the number of wells that?
We have an estimate. Do you know what the estimate is, Larry? Off the top of your head, I want to say 48, something like that. 40.
38.
38.
30, sorry, thank you. So yes, so they would be spaced about 25 feet or so apart. And they have a closed loop that gets put 600 feet into the ground that has the sort of, basically the water comes in, water comes out at a different temperature. And so they use the heat and cooling of the earth to heat and cool the building.
So when you space them out 25 feet times 38 or 48, where are those sited? Just to understand, is it under the building, under the parking lot?
Under the parking lot in the field, correct?
So the parking lot and the field? Potentially. So
Yeah, we haven't
I
finalized.
didn't know that, but
Yep.
does that mean another soccer field? Or does that just mean the present space that's getting disturbed?
No, the one that we would be replacing.
And then lastly, because I think just for simplicity, I didn't see, I think I saw one of those, trying to understand. Just to understand, so the average cost of value of a home, you came up with a number.
692,000 is the current, I don't know if it's average or
Like
median. I think it's
value.
actually median, isn't it? The median assessed value in Medfield is 692,000 and change.
Right,
This
so
year.
that comes up to like, if you take that average over the 30 years, I come up with about 20,521. Is that about right?
Over the course of,
Over the course of, I think it's 30.
it depends on if it's a 30-year bond or a 20-year
Oh,
bond.
it could go up if it's 20 and.
If it's 20 years, it'll be more than 18,000 and change, because
So
you pay
it's-
less, just like if you pay less on a 15-year mortgage, over time, it's less money, but every month it's more.
Right. So the initial hit could be between, okay, 8 and 1,000, and then average, you're gonna say over 30 years, about $520 for every household, roughly. Some are gonna be more, some are gonna be less, that's an average.
It depends, the way our taxes work is you're based on the assessed value, it's distributed. So if your house is assessed at 500,000, you'll be paying less. If your house is assessed at 2 million, and you're gonna be paying significantly more.
Last question, for real. I believe you're, just so you're listed, you're at schematic design.
Correct.
And just for everybody here, where is that in the deed, right? You have conceptual design,
Yes,
schematic design, design development,
correct.
construction documents, build a building.
Correct.
So the question would be, are we confident? How are we confident in the cost? Because we're talking about costs. We're talking about, what's it gonna be 5 years from now, 10 years, if you guys do
Yeah.
that. I just wanna understand,
No, that's
you
good.
said there's a 2% contingency, and that's about 1.6.
There's more than that. So there's.
So let's just
Yeah.
let me finish.
Sure, sorry.
Just so everybody understands, just trying to understand that at this level, we're not at that supersonic design, because I think you're waiting for a vote and whatever may happen. So there is some risk presently, and I guess, how are we feeling about that risk of immediate cost escalation? Forget 5 years.
Trust me, that's an excellent question, and it's one that have been spending countless hours on with my clients lately because of the crazy market that we're in. You know, I'll just give you a brief story and then I'll get into more of the details, but with my client in Ashland, they voted on their project and approved it in January before the economy, you know, all of a sudden, wasn't long after, you know, the government was pumping $2 trillion into the economy, and wow, shocking, we have inflation. So they had set their budget. Once you vote, you set your budget. And then you do the further stages of design and do further cost estimating. We did the next stage, design development, we did cost estimating in April and found that we were $5 million over budget not because the project had changed design-wise, but because the cost of a steel column that was, you know, X amount of dollars was all of a sudden 20% higher or 15% higher, depending on, you know, which product we're talking about, drywall, glass and glazing, anything having to do with electrical, which might get attested to copper, all of a sudden was significantly higher. So we had to go back into the project and say, all right, what can we take out to get us back to budget? We were able to do that, but there's only so much you can take out before you start to impact program. So we were able to do it without it impacting any educational program or anything like that. Really trying to do our best to simplify the building and the site. And we did the next phase. We go through the next phase. We go back to budget. We go through the next phase. And in August, we did another round of cost estimating, 1.8 million over budget. And at that point, they had to make some hard decisions about program that they wanted in the building. And we took some money out of contingency because that's what contingency is for as well. Now, we don't want to spend that contingency during design if we can avoid it, because that's money that's really set aside for unforeseen risk during construction. But we can use it for pricing contingency. And so let me walk you through a little bit of where we stand with contingencies. The MSBA doesn't want to spend a ton of time and money getting through and bidding a job and then having the town vote it, because they will have invested so much money, because they're trying to allocate that money throughout. They have us vote on the project much earlier than we normally would as a town. Every project that I've put in front of this town, we've gone with hard bid numbers. And we knew we paid for the design and we knew exactly what it was going to cost outside of smaller contingencies, but we had contingencies in there. And we went to town with the actual numbers. That would be my ideal scenario, but that doesn't work in the MSBA world. So they basically agreed to reimburse each town through the schematic design phase. And then because of their expertise and the expertise of the teams that manage these projects, they're always looking at historical trends. So we make decisions about pricing contingency. So this means that if we're bidding the job a year from now, what do we expect inflation to be? And we had been working off of the norm of about 4 to 5% up until this year. And as I noted, this year is probably going to exceed 10%. So we can build in a guess, but we're guessing. So there's pricing contingencies that are built in that basically says, you know, we think it's going to cost this much more when we actually bid the job next year. The next contingency we have is called design contingency. So this is basically saying that we know we don't have the design completed, and there's going to be things that, you know, are going to come along that we're going to need, we got to put in that may not be in the project now because we haven't fully thought it through and fully gone through the design process. We then have owner's contingencies, which I outlined a little bit, which are for either an owner contingency for soft costs. Let's say we have to do some additional testing, or we have to pay some additional fees because, you know, we have to rework part of the design later on in the process. And then we have construction contingencies. Construction contingencies are there. We put a shovel in the ground. You know, we find something that we weren't expecting. We have to make some changes to the design of the foundation, something like that to that effect. We have some contingencies to deal with that, as well as any, you know, don't take it personally, Larry, but every architect and engineer, they're never going to get 100% clear on the design. There's no such thing as 100%. So there's always going to be things that, you know, we make sure that they do their best to coordinate everything and make sure all the trades are talking to each other. But inevitably, there's going to be something where two trades don't connect and something's missing. And so construction contingency allows us to deal with those issues. So to summarize, that we feel comfortable with our contingency levels where they are now, even given, and I use comfort not too lightly, because the way the market is right now, it is absolutely insane. Now, I don't expect it to continue. Most people in the industry don't expect it to continue like this forever. But it is, they've been saying it multiple times, estimates. So ultimately, you know, if there's a big surprise and the 10% inflation continues throughout next year, then we're gonna have to figure out how we handle that. If we can absorb it within our budget, if it becomes too excessive, then there may come a point where we have to come back to the town for money. I don't expect that to happen. And that's what I call the nuclear option. I believe we've put together a budget that is appropriate. Budgeting a project like this is always, I call it threading the needle. Anyone can manage a project that's got an excessive budget, but it wouldn't get approved at town meeting. Anybody, you know, can cut contingencies out such that there's a ton of risk and no way to deal with it, and then going back to town meeting and asking for more money, saying, oh, sorry. So what our goal here is to put together a budget that we feel comfortable we can accomplish the project for, that won't leave us in a position of risk or won't leave us in a position to have to ask for more money down the line. Does that answer your question?
Laurel Scotty, 10 Green Street, and a senior. I'm referencing back to the Tisbury comments where site location raised the cost. I think I can pretty much guarantee that if that's the road, these seniors will band together and make sure that the relax site happens, because we're not going to vote for something that costs more money just because.
So just to be clear, the reason isn't necessarily solely because one site was more expensive than the other. It was because the town had put forth a project, it got rejected, and then they spent a few years getting back into the system, and then they ultimately came up with another project. So part of it has to do with just inflation, and part of it, you know, I don't know the exact details of it all, but I don't believe it was solely because of the site selection.
And I understand that, but I think that it's important that we all understand how much the delay is going to cost. And I'm speaking as a senior, and I support the new site. I support the relax site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Barry Morrison, 19 Gary Drive. I don't think the town can afford to rush into any decision at this time based upon the documents that have been sent to this town. We have numerous documents to read on the costs, on the square footage, on the site pros, the site cons. And when we read these documents, somehow what has been presented is that we need 98,000 square feet, potentially. 95. I read 98, but.
It was previously 98, but we reduced the square footage to try to maintain and contain costs.
Not sure anybody has the details of the 95, but I think what might be important for residents of this town is to understand the one-page listing of square feet of what we have at Dale, 58,000 potentially, versus what we want of 95 potentially. That might be a 35% increase in square footage. We should understand why we need that. It might be a 50% per square foot increase. I think the town residents should know what classrooms on a square foot basis should be increased or are being planned to increase, because the basis of.
We have all that. That's on the website. Yeah.
That'd be perfect.
We can point it out to you, yeah.
If we can have it and read it, because the square footage is the price of construction. And so.
Yeah, so just, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to respond.
If I may speak.
Oops, sorry, my bad. Yep.
Speaking.
Sure.
If I may, when I see the price estimates of potentially 77.3 at the G1 site at 98,000 square feet, and then I see potentially another 11 million added on to that for 88 could be 88, could be 82. I assume we have the details of 81 million, 82 million square feet. It might include, redoing Medfield water mains. It may include millions in equipment, millions in furniture. We'd like to see the soft costs that have been buried in the budget.
They're not buried right here.
Okay, if they're articulate and detailed in the 82 million, those are a few first thoughts. The town cannot afford the square footage of the building presented. When we look at enrollments, we look at enrollment history and we look at enrollment future. We look at the demographic future. And when you measure the two together, there's a big gap on square footage. Why we need 50% more. It's so important for the town residents to understand. 50% more square footage potentially. I think that's the most important thing we have going here on this vote. I think we should pull back on the vote. I think we should reflect on what we want to present as a future vote, as a future square footage for a beautiful building serving 2 classes, to curb deferred maintenance of what we have, and to even bring in maybe a FAP project too, because that's important too. And when I look at these costs, construction costs, trade costs, soft costs, they're astounding. And I think they need more revision, but I appreciate your committee's service to the town, all the work you've done on multiple sites, G1, E1, for hours of work. Appreciate the time. I think we just need a little bit more time to be a team on square footage, which really defines the cost of a building and the cost of debt to this town. Because when you look at the Moody's report that we have just received, and you look at the factors leading to a downgrade of the town's debt.
We haven't been downgraded.
Okay, we have not been downgraded, but when you look at the current report and you match it up to the warrant article of 21, excuse me, and match it up to the warrant article of 22, the town Moody's fund balances appear to be voted at already a 56% decrease. And so we're already on the path to potentially a downgrade before we borrow 82 million that we don't need to borrow. We can borrow possibly 62. We can borrow possibly 58, and we can borrow possibly 72. It all depends on how we plan the square footage, construction estimates. We're going net zero emissions. That adds some cost. We need to see square feet that we have now for a square feet that we have planned at 100% increase. Thank you.
Thank you. What I just wanted to make sure it's clear, our bond rating was just affirmed last week. We have not been downgraded. Moody's has affirmed our bond rating, and our current estimate is based off of that bond rating. And I don't believe we would be up for review before we borrow, correct?
No, they'll review it in connection with the next issue.
With the next issue,
In the
yeah.
report, it did reflect an increase in our reserves,
Yeah.
and they noted that as a positive factor.
The bond rating was based upon June 30th, 20 final financial statements.
That was over a year ago.
That was maybe 2 years ago.
You
Now
said
when
June
we
20?
enter fiscal 22, and we plan on taking down significant debt, Moody's is going to come back, and they're going to review what we voted on the warrant of 21, and they're going to review what we voted on the warrant of 22. They're going to see the variance, see the spending of the town's capital budget, And then we're gonna borrow on top of that, 82 million. And we're gonna get downgraded,
We won't be borrowing 82 million.
or 75, or 65.
63.
But we could borrow.
I think it's
30.
important that we be clear on these numbers and not just throwing out random
We could
numbers.
throw out any number from 60 to 40, doesn't matter.
It does matter.
It does matter to the town residents, but when you look at the Moody's ratings, if we borrow 65 million, 63, exactly 63,
Yeah.
depending on schematic estimates, not based upon design development estimates, and not based upon final construction dock estimates, which could raise the price significantly. It's unknown. We need more time to research costs.
Thank you.
Just real quick in regard to square foot costs, because I kind of took that away from your comments. You know, the number of classrooms that are required per grade were, you know, Jeff and his team did a great job of explaining exactly why we needed the quantity of classrooms. Arrow Street designed the job, that the classrooms are the smallest size allowable by MSBA for all of them. There's not a wasted square foot in this building. The only added space, square footage wise, that, from my opinion, is a larger gym that we elected to go for. And further, we already downgraded that because we wanted a larger one originally. So when you talk about square foot costs for a 2-grade school, this is about as small as you can get.
Thank you. Thank you all again for your volunteer work. But when we see 58,000 square feet,
That's not
That's
usable.
not, 58,000 isn't accurate. It's a 95,000 square foot building.
He's talking about the
the
existing.
current
Oh.
building is 58,000 square feet.
Which
It's
apologies,
been
yep.
published and documented. And when we see 98,000 or maybe 95,000 that I have not seen, it's a 100% increase
No,
in square feet.
I totally agree. The
And
numbers,
what we need to see is a list
it's not,
of square feet.
We have that and we can provide it for you.
And every resident of the town should see that one-page Excel fit-to-print list on where the square footage is being put, where we're investing. in
We have
square
that
feet.
and we can provide it for you.
Thank you.
And it was posted in March of 2020.
Yes, it's over a year and a half.
If that could be updated from the 98 that was published in 2020 to the 95 that we don't have, that would be wonderful.
Will do.
Chris 57 Herb Street. So I had just a question on just overall process in terms of reuse of Dale Street. So this Board of Selectmen are on record, I think it was 2018, 2019, I have to go back and look at the actual date, stating that, and it may have actually been when they were talking about the feasibility study funding for Park and Recreation. But they were talking about Dale Street School. They were talking about the reuse of Dale Street School and how that process would work. And the selectmen had stated that the decision on reuse of Dale Street School would be part of the master plan. And then it was also communicated to MSBA on a couple of different instances and documents that a committee would be formed to determine the reuse of Dale Street School. So I have two questions here. Who really has the authority to make that decision? When did the Permanent Building and Planning Committee actually gain the authority to make a recommendation to the selectmen?
The permanent building.
I can address the process.
Thank you.
I mean, and the reality is that the first thing that has to happen in the process is the school committee has to decide they don't need the building anymore. Right? This is currently committed to the care, custody, and control of the school committee. And while I appreciate Dr. Marsden's skepticism about the prospect for universal pre-K, we don't know what's going to happen. So if some mandate comes down between now and 2024, when we get to that point, assuming the building is built in Elm Street, the school committee may decide they still need the building. They may decide because of a new thing they've been required to do, they're going to have to use it for some reason. So that's the first step. So anything we do about what we're going to do with Dale Street, we can't bind any of that. Because the first step is going to be the school committee deciding this is surplus, and they can then offer it back to the town. All right, so that's step number one. So anything we talk about for reuse is identifying, sort of like with the hospital, right? With the hospital, we bought the hospital, we couldn't define exactly what we're going to do. We do it for a range of options. That's kind of where we are, because if you can't do anything until the school committee decides they don't want it anymore. And once they do, then assuming they return it back to the Board of Selectmen, ultimately, if there's money involved, it would have to be appropriated by town meeting. So to the extent the money is going to come out of, for example, municipal building stabilization fund, that would be appropriated at town meeting. And so if there's going to be a reuse committee, it would probably be at that point, when you're getting closer to the end, and then we'll probably have a sense from the school committee before the drop dead date of whether they're going to release it or not. Then to decide, okay, here are what the options are of this range of options that we have. And it's going to depend on where we are at the time. And so it depends on the condition of the building. It depends on a number of factors. So I think we're going to have a meeting with the warrant committee, subcommittee tomorrow night, maybe it's tonight by this point. We're going to have a meeting with the warrant committee about the reuse. And anything you're going to do is just identifying what the range of options are. Right. And so the permanent planning and building committee, given their expertise in construction, their expertise in buildings, I certainly would want to know what they think about it. I would want to know a sanity check from them, on anything an architect or another advisor is telling us what they think is feasible, because they have a pretty good track record with the buildings in town. Coming in under budget as part of the construction process. And so from that construction technical standpoint, we certainly want their advice. They don't have the authority to do it, right? If money is going to be involved, it's going to have to go through a town meeting. If it's returned to the town, ultimately the selectmen will then have the care, custody, and control for it. But ultimately, there will have to be, unless it's a completely free transition, there'd have to be some sort of vote of an appropriation of funds for anything that's done with that building. So it's not like this is going to be decided by a committee without going through town meeting. This is just, it's a legitimate question. You have to understand what the options are. You have to understand what decisions we're foreclosing with either path that we take, what the future looks like in either proposal. So it's important to know that. No one can give a definitive answer on exactly what we're going to do.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess and also sitting at the selectmen's meeting, your meeting last night, listening about the housing production plan and how the senior housing is another option that could be put on the table for the Dale Street School, given the incredible need that we're going to have in the future for senior housing. So that's another option. But if it would qualify as a municipal, under the deed, which was donated to the town, it has to be used for municipal use. And there's been discussions over the years about what exactly that means. Potentially, you could have some kind of housing option there if the town decided not to have Parks and Rec or have something else, or the schools don't need it anymore. That's a conceivable option as well. But again, the housing production plan, it's a proposal, it's a suggestion, it's a possibility. It's not something we can definitively say that this is what it's going to be. So what I'm basically saying is that while the park and recreation option of only $2 million to use the path and move them in there, we should be looking at, well, what are the other options and how much will they cost the town? Because that is one of several options, and it's not the domain of the permanent planning and building committee to make that decision. So for those of us who are going to be voting on this school project, we actually need to see estimated costs of, say, the 3 different scenarios of how Dale would be reused and what those costs would be. That would be a fair thing to present to.
Well, yeah, and obviously, if it's senior housing, the cost is 0, right? Because the developer is going to build it. So if it's something other than a municipal use, it's essentially probably a revenue. If you're allowed to turn it into housing, well, land there in Medfield for housing is worth a lot of money. And so that would be a positive, revenue positive. So from my perspective, looking at it from potential liabilities, I'm not going to factor in sort of the rosy scenario where someone pays us, $3 million for the site. Right. That would be great if you want to say, hey, but I think the way I think about it is, what are the liabilities we can sort of be forced into, right? What are the liabilities that are not going to be a free choice of the town? And I always think of that just like with the hospital, right? With the hospital, the only thing we could have been forced eventually to do, we may still be forced eventually to do, would be to mitigate, tear down, remove the building. So that's sort of the backstop forced liability. When I think of the liability we could be forced into with Dale Street, if we can't agree on something to do there, we can't use it for whatever reason, or we decide we don't want to, ultimately you can't let the building fall apart. And so you'd be stuck with the demolition cost. That's sort of the unchosen liability. Anything else we do there is something that the town is going to be able to choose with the facts in front of us at the time. And I think, again, this is just my risk way of looking at it from a risk standpoint. are there a range of options that are reasonable and that aren't going to force us into coming back to the town and saying, oh, now you have to pay $25 million for this, you know? And so that to me that's the nature of that discussion. I mean, are there a range of options that are reasonable that we think we can cover with an existing revenue source? And again, if the numbers are 2 million, 2.5 million between demolition and the remediation, and to move somebody in there, that's something we can cover within our existing tax base, right? Because in that capital plan, there's some things will have been done. Some of the Dale Street expenses won't have to be done because it won't be a school. I mean, the school is the most intensive use of the building we can have, given the number of people who are in there. So the reuse for something else is something different. So I don't think, and I think when we talk about these options, just so people are clear, nobody's giving you a definitive answer of this is what is going to happen. And anyone who tries to tell you, here is the definitive answer of what's going to happen, they're not telling you the truth, because we can't control that. We can't control what the school committee circuit 2024 will do. We can't control what the facts are going to be. We can't control if we get a mandate we have to comply with, and we need that space. And so again, this is something I've thought about a lot, given the concerns I have, and a lot of time the selectmen spent on these long-term liabilities. Do we have a range of options that we're not going to be forced into something that's really negative? I'm comfortable we won't, but we actually have to explore it. The warrant committee is going to be spending a lot of time on this tomorrow night, and drilling down what the possibilities are. But I do think if it's housing, it's almost certainly revenue for the town. It's going to be revenue for the sale of land, and it's going to be additional tax bill.
And I guess my concern is, and I was at the permanent building planning or permanent planning and building committee meeting with Park and Recreation, where when they voted on the recommendation, and there was the recommendation that was made was not based on costs. There was no cost information that was part of that. It was just a flat recommendation that they're next in queue, and it should be recommendation should be made to put them into that building. And it's been pushed forward that it's sort of a foregone conclusion.
No.
The Park and Rec is going to be, it has been.
No, we're exploring that option.
Well, it's been, let's just say it's.
And that is our current, the permanent building committee believes that with the current information we have, that that's the best option for the reuse of that building. Because it solves a short-term need for very little money and with the potential of doing a future long-term. If, you know, we are an advisory committee on the permanent building committee side, we make recommendations. And our recommendation would be to the Board of Selectmen, if the Board of Selectmen regain care, custody, and control because the school committee decides it's not needed. So that's all we've done is explored an option. It is not set in stone. We're exploring that as an option, as a way to solve another problem in town, another space problem.
So but the only question I would say is that based on the selectmen's meeting that I listened to, when a feasibility study money was appropriated, they specifically said that this was a master planning decision. It was not a permanent planning and building committee decision. It was a master planning decision.
And,
So
and I think the
that-
master plan committee decided to punt on it. I mean, I think the reality was, this is what Gus's point was, he was hoping the master plan would have a recommendation for the future, because one of the issues with the Parks and Recreation building is that there has been different perspectives within the Parks and Recreation Commission about where they wanted that building to go. So when they last presented to us the $20 million sort of four kicks, essentially the Medfield four kicks. Their view was at the time, and I think it was the view of the Parks and Rec Commission, which obviously has a say in where the Parks and Rec Committee goes. They wanted the building up by McCarthy because they thought it was better for their camps. They thought they could use the building up there. I think the reaction, as I recall, from the selectmen was somewhat more hesitant. I think certainly my preference is to have it closer to the center of town than at the hospital, but it's not my choice, not my decision. So there was kind of a back and forth about that from the site. I think Parks and Rec has had, I don't know if I'm calling a change of heart. I think their views have evolved more towards preferring a downtown location to something out at McCarthy. And I think it's evolved away from sort of the four kicks like structure that they had proposed.
In my discussions with them, it boils down to, and to Ms. Murphy's point, they want something, and they see this short-term fix as a way for them to expand their services with twice as much square footage and be able to provide more. That gives them a short-term solution. And long-term, that hasn't been decided, but they are supportive of this because they see this as a way to solve their problems in the short term as well.
And I think they look at it. I think
They can
probably-
speak for themselves
yeah.
on that as well.
They, yeah, and I think they look at it the same way a lot of people are saying, we're not necessarily gonna look to swallow another building project right after this one. So what that, 8 to 10 year period would do is it would get past the point where the garage is paid off, and you get almost to the end of paying off public safety bills. You'd have about 70 of the existing debt in town, about 70% of the principal is coming off for the next 10 years. And with a little bit of that tail on public safety, over 2035.
2035 is it'll be paid off.
Yeah, the garage is 2032, 2031. So I think that's kind of some of, I think, what I hear from Parks and Rec is that just from a practical standpoint, because I agree that it does seem like they've been last on a list that
Keep getting
for
bumped
30
back.
years.
Yeah. 30 years,
And so I think, but maybe there's a good reason for that, maybe there's not. But I think that's part of it too, is just the practical sense of once that debt from the garage is off, there's a little more capacity for taxpayers at that point.
So my other questions might be, hopefully you can answer this too, just from a this governance, decision-making standpoint. Is it just the selectmen who decide that these various town funds are gonna be tapped into, like municipal?
No, any town fund that gets
No,
spent have to be appropriated by town meeting.
Right,
So
I
the
understand
best the
that.
selectmen
What's
can do is
the,
make a proposal in the budget at town meeting to say, we think we should appropriate, if the number is $2 million to move Park and Rec in there. We can say, and then the town meeting gets to vote, 2/3 of the town meeting can vote to appropriate that money or not.
okay.
And,
so I-
and where it's coming from.
Right, I totally understand that that's the ultimate vote, but as we all know with a lot of these projects, as we know right now, that there are a lot of interim decision-making steps that happen, because usually by the time you get to town meeting, it's too late to really influence a path that you're gonna take. So my question is, what is the interim step? Did the selectmen make a recommendation to take the money out of the building stabilization fund? Is that a capital budget committee?
I think, look, we like to form committees, so I suspect as we get closer to that point, we would form, or the selectmen would form a use committee to look at the range of options at that point. Once you are closer to the facts, once you have a sense that the school committee is going to reach the conclusion they don't need the building anymore, and would make a recommendation, and it would be like any other process. There would be obviously select meetings to be committee meetings, select meetings, warrant meetings, and all the rest of it for people to weigh in on what they want to do.
Mike, I have to say, I don't know, I'll speak for the whole school committee, but it's gonna take us a little time to think about that.
Yeah, no, you have to figure, it's a decision to be made, right? It's not,
Probably.
it's not
Yeah,
a.
At least 18 months.
It's
Yeah,
not
and
a
I think
simple
we have to look
decision.
at the bigger picture, because, sitting and listening to capital budget, and seeing all the other needs that we have in town, it's not like we have an unlimited amount of funds. And if we can take money from one place, and use it for something else, I think there's a lot of sort of priority setting that needs to happen, and it can't just be an automatic, like, okay, well, they want this, so we're gonna take it from this fund, and the heck with everything else. So there
Well,
just has
I
to
don't
be a
think,
lot of-
I hope I haven't suggested that it's automatic. I think, again, when you're looking at something, you can't predict the future with complete precision. And so we're trying to identify what's the menu of options the towns can choose from when it's time to choose. And what is that range of options? I do think it's important to have, sort of a concrete viable option, in the sense that economically viable, it's viable from a construction standpoint, it's realistic, as opposed to, well, we have a bunch of theories, right? You want to have something to say, all right, here's a reasonable reuse of this. We shouldn't be planning to demolish it because we do think there are reasonable reuses of it. And then as we get closer to it, as with anything else, there'll be input on exactly what we end up doing, exactly what that looks like. I mean, who knows? You have some wealthy person who loves Park and Rec and wants to donate money to a new Park and Rec building, and they say, well, we're getting our Medfield 4 kids. The heck with all of you, right? So
Well,
we
the other
can't
thing-
force them in there either. So
The other thing that I noticed from the selectmen's meeting, over the Park and Rec feasibility study, is that all three of you were fairly unanimous that Park and Recreation should be self-funding
no, we were not.
facility.
No.
Well, that was stated at the meeting.
No, I don't, no, that was not stated. I
It
think
was.
Gus took the position, I don't know if he still holds it, that the Park and Rec building should be privately funded.
He stated that many times.
He stated that many times. I don't know if that's still his position. That's not my position. Right?
Should be what, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair.
That the Parks and Rec building should be privately funded. So fundraise for it and all of that. So, I mean, I don't think I've ever agreed with Gus on that. So if I did, I'd be surprised that we were fairly unanimous on anything. like that.
This is true.
Especially if we agree with each other. But I mean, I haven't watched, you've watched that meeting more recently than I have, but I don't think I've ever, certainly not my view now, and I don't recall holding the view that Parks and Rec should be self-funding. I think if they wanted a $20 million 4Kicks building, a lot of the economics they presented during that meeting was dependent upon the notion that they were going to rent all of this to private clubs, private, they were going to try to manage this building. I know one of the concerns that we had, I think the building committee has well, which is you're kind of putting yourself now in the business of managing a facility as opposed to being what you're supposed to do is running programs for the town, right? It's biting off a lot to run that kind of facility.
And I think just from a pure factual basis is that facilities, that 2007 facilities report specifically gave a range, I think it was $15 to $18 million for reuse of Dale Street School, specifically as a non-school use, it was for office and recreation use. And that's 2017. So it'll be very interesting to see what you get for that $2 million.
That was a full renovation of the entire building, not putting them in there and doing the minimum we needed just to make sure they can occupy it.
Different scopes of work.
Very different scopes of work.
Right, but for how long?
That's a question for the town. At what point does the town say we support something for parking? I don't know.
I'm still Jerry Potts. It's been a long night.
Still?
I'm still 2 hours early. I am not speaking on behalf of the townwide master plan, but since Mike mentioned it and I was on the committee, it's not a position on this at all. But just quickly on the Dale Street, on the state hospital, and on Park and Rec. The reason that the townwide master plan didn't come up with specific recommendations is we were in the middle of doing the RFP or the RFI for the state hospital, and also in the middle of voting and doing the project and feasibility for the Dale Street School. So at the time, the townwide master plan figured that they had missed the boat on those two projects, that they were going to be well down the queue. So what the townwide master plan said is, depending on what happened to either one of those projects, we have these three important things that we're going to have to address. We didn't have any better crystal ball on sort of what the future was going to be and what those decisions were going to be. That plan is now done, and I think, following the guidelines on that would give some insights on a lot of the decisions we're making. But it couldn't make a recommendation on any of these because of the conflict. So it wasn't that it didn't look at it or try to consider it. It's the reality that two of those plans were already well underway. And the townwide master plan, the committee felt that would probably be done by the time. So, but as part of that, one of the recommendations we've made, going back to the 575 student capacity that this is being built for, I have stated repeatedly that the enrollment is somewhere between 370 to 400 when this school opens, at least based on the
It's
current.
391 today, just for clarity.
Okay, between 370, but if you take the grades that are going to be there in 2 years, it looks like it's around 370. And all I'm saying is at the peak in 2005, there were 500 students at Dale Street, there were 500 in Wheeler. And that was the peak, and it was, our kids were actually in the school during that period of time. So what we have been recommending, and it keeps getting spun a little bit differently, is at least for programming, for that same 8 to 10 year period, you need something for Park and Rec. There will be capacity after school and in summers at this brand new building that's done at Dale, and it will be in the center of town. So there is another alternative to evaluate that we would hope, and we've raised this, and I understand you can't put administration in, but it is totally possible to use open space in school buildings for community services. It is done all the time.
If we want to sacrifice our reimbursement.
No, using the open space, we're not saying, when day one opens up, you're saying MSBA is not going to allow us to use empty space.
As Parks and Rec? No, they won't. Why would they reimburse us?
So for educational program, a senior who wants to use it, or after school for kids, they use it today.
Oh, after school, yeah, but.
I'm not saying during, I said
temporary use,
clearly, after school and during summers, when the building is not being used.
Are you asking to move the Parks and Rec building into the school?
No, what I'm asking is the administration stay at that, we get a smaller administration building, and then we use this 200 student capacity that we just built in a $70 to $80 million building. We leverage it for town use for Park and Rec. It'll have a new gym, it'll have classrooms, it'll have space that could be used after school, a lot of space. And that's a reality when we open up. It's gonna be 200 students under its capacity.
And we're gonna use the gym for more than just Parks and Rec. It'll be rented out for Medfield youth basketball and all other uses. The schools already look at utilizing their spaces for revenue generation.
So for summer camp, which Park and Rec needs space for, they couldn't use the school.
They do now.
They do now.
Right,
And they
and so they'll have a beautiful new school renovated with a gym that during the summer they would be able to use. All we're asking for is, again, these are the kind of options that
You've heard your statement.
you've heard it, and you cut me off repeatedly on trying to do it.
Yeah.
So you've listened, but you haven't actually answered the questions on why those aren't factored in. Thank you.
All right, well, this has been, I think, good conversation to have, and I recognize that we may not all agree, but I do, I genuinely appreciate the conversation here tonight, and I am thankful that we can do more of this in person, because I do think it does help. I think emotions can run high, especially since we have spent a year and a half looking at our faces on Zoom, so I'm going to cut everybody some slack on that. So thank you all for your time. We will, of course, be holding more conversations and continuing to disseminate as much information as possible. Just as a reminder, ways to contact us. Our email address, newelementaryschoolproject@gmail.com. www.tinyurl.com/mednewschool, our Facebook page, etc. So if anybody wants to follow up with questions, they're more than welcome to. But I'm not seeing any more at the microphone. Does the committee have anything else that they'd like to add this evening?
I prepared a 20-page.
Denied.
This was a broadcast. I
Good
believe.
question.
Yeah.
Was it a broadcast or?
I mean, given that it's 9:45, I think we will look at those questions. If there are any, we can download them and respond to them. But I don't want to further extend, given the late hour. So I'm going to respectfully say that we will look into that and we will respond if needed. But unless anyone has any objection, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you, everyone.
I'm gonna take some time.
I know. Thank you for your question.